is that idea. I'm going to look at some of the drawings and stuff like that, and also go over questions you guys are having. Because normally what we do, and I probably said this, but normally what I like to do is run field trips and stuff, and then every now and then we're in class, and then we can sort of, answer questions and things like that in class, which is kind of what I want to do today. Find out problems you're having, that kind of thing, and talk a little bit about the stylization thing. And what I want you guys to understand is stylization can actually help you see observationally too, because you're starting to really see, you're starting to really think about those shapes when you're pushing them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So sometimes when people do, and I don't like the word caricature, but whatever, when people do that kind of stylized thing or caricature, whatever you want to call it, in our case, I think I want to think of it more as a stylization. And the reason is, and I think I was going to do this the other day and I forgot. And by the way, the other stuff that I said I'm getting to, it's just that for some reason the weather will not cooperate. Like right now, it's all supposedly going to rain again. And then yesterday I had like 3 days where it was okay. And I go, oh, good, I'm going to go out tomorrow. Because I keep thinking the bad weather's over and it's not. So I'll get that done as soon as the sun comes out. And then there's a couple other things I still got to do. What was I going to say? Oh, the stylization thing. So sometimes, like when people, I used to go, I was in college with this guy who did, he was really good even then, and he would always do these caricatures of people and stuff like that, and they always looked more like the person than the person actually looked like. Does that make sense? That's when you really hit it. When you look at it and you go, that looks more like that. There's another weird one of Tom Cruise that Sebastian Kruger did, and it's screws around with his features in a weird way that you're like, it just makes you see them in a different way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole, getting a handle on this thing. So this project that I want to do with you guys, I do it every term. The reason we call it Cafe de Characters, we usually start somewhere and we do them from life. And that's how we start it, okay? The idea of it is obviously to start talking about stylization and all that stuff, but it's also just kind of learning the value. Let me turn off my speakers. The value of working quickly from life like that and just getting a lot of ideas and being immersed in something, okay? Let me turn off this. It's gonna drive my girlfriend crazy. Hang on. Anyway, so what we want to do is, since we can't do it from life, and you can do it from life, because I've had people and they use their parents or somebody who's in the house, just because that's what sparked their imagination. The trick here is that you want to look at something and then start to do what I was trying to get through in the video, which is, you're sort of this internal conversation going on about this all the time, and it starts drifting into a little bit of a narrative, and then the narrative helps you have a structure to hang your design on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's not just going, oh, that person has a big nose, so I'm going to amplify that. It's not really about that. Especially in our case, we're not talking about caricature so much here. We're talking about stylization, okay? And those are two different things. And I'm also going to do it. I meant to do it the other day. I just realized I forgot. But I'm going to do a little bit of stylization on a few different things. I'll probably do another video of objects or maybe environments or just whatever pops in my head, and I'll put a video out on that and how this idea, because this isn't just about people, it's about apply this idea to anything. Okay? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are quiet.
Yeah.
Okay, so as far as just what we've been doing, who has questions? Nobody?
I don't
Where's Elon?
question.
Elon, go ahead.
Oh.
Hmm?
Okay, never mind.
No, go ahead.
I mean, I just want my schedule to be reviewed of how I was going. That's all. That's what I've been wondering. So yeah.
How you what?
I just wonder if you already got my sketches.
To look at them?
Yeah.
I'm having problems keeping, I guess, in proportion section to section. So say the face, it's in proportion, and then maybe the body and the right arm in proportion. But then as I keep going down the body, it starts to like drift away.
Okay, that's really common. Okay, Brendan, I'll go back to you in a little bit. That's a really common thing. I mean, what happens is, let me share my screen. Hang on. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yep. Yes.
So what tends to happen here is, and I'm not sure how you're working, but usually when you're having that problem, and I mentioned this in the video too, by the way, because I was sort of working shape to shape in the beginning of that video, and that's why at the end of it I didn't, okay? At the end of it, I went back into big shapes. So usually when you're having a problem where you're doing that, it's usually because you're sort of working, I don't know, maybe piecemeal, you know, or maybe you're putting this in, this arm or something, and then these things start getting away from you because you're working shape to shape. So this might go out here. I see this a lot with things like knees and things. All of a sudden this knee will end up like out here or something like that because you're just not looking at where it is. Are you working shape to shape, or are you going in big shapes first?
Yeah, I think seeing that example, I am working in that shape to shape thing, thinking that I'm putting in those bigger shapes.
Yeah, so what you want to do, okay, so here's what you kind of want to do. Let me find something I can just use as a reference. Oh, it's over here, hang on. Well, let's look at, this guy's pretty straightforward. If I'm putting this down, okay, okay, if I'm starting to work on this guy, and I might have to get another one here to make it a little more obvious, but let's see if I can do it here. I'm going to put that head shape down, which is a little bit triangular. He's got a collar, and then I'm going to try and get these. If you notice, his shoulders are tilted a little bit, and then his hips are opposing them, which they usually do. I'm going to start to throw this kind of idea down. And what I'm doing here is everything that I'm throwing down, like he's got a little belt thing right here. Okay, and then he's got this little thing here. So when I look at, once I put the belt down or any landmark like that, then I go, where does his arm land? It starts to bend right underneath that belt, okay? This one comes down a little further. Now, once I put this stuff down, his head probably ought to go a little higher. And I know that how, because I can see some of his collars. That means his head has to go a little higher. Okay, then I look at this and I go, it feels like his leg's a little short. And then this leg's got to come out a little more this way. Okay, but the point being is I want to get these big shapes in here first, keep them light and loose, and then I can start to build. And then also, every time I put a shape down, I'm measuring off of that shape. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Here, I think it's easier for like, because everything is put together, and I'd say I'd have a fine time doing that.
Mhm.
It's usually when they're like arms outstretched and then their legs, like maybe one's going forward, one's going back, when they're really like exaggerated in their movement.
Like in a walking pose?
Yeah, or maybe like somebody's leaning where their arm is like up and the other arm is doing something else, and their limbs are just like further away from the body.
Hang on. It's still the same drill, but I get what you're saying. Trying to find somebody who's doing something. Like, you mean something like that?
Exactly.
Okay, it's the same. Now this is a nice silhouette. But if you look, you got, and so let's go a little bigger. What's good about this too is you can't see a lot of detail, so you don't get hung up on it. So we still have the same idea. Head shape. And then I'm just going to try and really quickly go. Okay, so look right here. Let's switch this. Right here, there's a nice simple square right there. You see that?
Yeah.
So I want to think about that when I start building this whole thing together. I got to get, now another thing I'm looking at, okay, here, this is good that you brought this up like an action pose. Let's get this foot nailed, try and get it nailed down. One of the things I'm looking at when I'm doing this, which I think is probably helpful, this actually has more of an angle to it now that I'm looking at it, is I'm looking where this knee, just loosely, I'm looking where this knee falls in relation to that shape. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so what that's going to do is it's going to help you to get, to your point, where things start getting wonky away from each other and all that kind of thing. If you're thinking about where everything lands, and I don't mean sitting there and doing these like, plumb line things, but just kind of go, oh, that lands right about where the shoulder is. It'll help you to kind of keep everything so it's not getting all wonky and out of control. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like this, I might actually push a little bit. And when I'm doing this, knee actually should be about like that, I think. Okay, so once I put that shape down, then I know where, like this kind of does that. That's how they meet. Okay, so then I can start to put the other leg here and start to build that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then now I look at it and I go, look, his behind is here. His leg actually falls way out here, or his foot. Okay, so that starts giving me all these measuring points, which is what I need. Okay, and it doesn't matter. Hang on. Oh, it's fine. It doesn't matter what I'm drawing. Then this one actually is pretty close here. So I'm just going to indicate that. And all I'm doing right now is indicating things. And then this is pretty easy because I can just go, that glove follows right about there. Then I'd have to start coming in here and like this. I like the way this collar rides up on there. He's got a hat on. And I don't commit to anything for a while. His face is actually down facing a little more. And I start to just block it out that way. And then if you notice here, his head comes out a little further from the hand. So I could probably go in there and do that. I'm constantly measuring off of what I'm doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer some of that?
Yeah, that's Yeah, because I was trying to use the smaller shapes to kind of measure where I was going, but I
Big
wasn't.
shapes.
Yeah,
Big
I wasn't
shapes.
getting big enough.
Always big shapes. I don't care if you're drawing a house, a car, a person, a dog. It doesn't matter. You got to get those big shapes. Then you go secondary shapes. Then you go tertiary shapes. And as long, and by the way, if you know, look at it in a mirror throughout. So when I'm doing this, one way or the other, it's good to just do that and just go, okay, is it still balanced and stuff? And if it is, if you got this kind of just this loose structure, your first big shape in there, and then you flip it and it's pretty balanced, you're good to keep moving forward because it's you got a good foundation. If you don't have that foundation, if it's all wonky and weird looking, it ain't gonna work. Okay? And what people think is I'm gonna go shade it, I'm gonna go do a bunch of fancy hatching on it, I'm gonna go do all this stuff on it. It's like it's not gonna work. It's lipstick on a pig. It's a bad drawing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I don't know why this thing keeps coming back over here. I don't want this over here. Okay. All right, other questions? Because I love those kind of questions, okay?
Hey, Mike.
Hmm? Yeah.
So are we gonna do stuff like human interactions? You know, like
Well, the one I just
hugging
posted
or...
yesterday is.
Oh, okay. Got
Did
it.
you see the video I put up?
Oh, not yet.
Okay,
I
I don't
received
expect
the...
everybody to have seen it because like I was trying to get that up sooner, but it takes actually a while to put those kind of videos together, especially when they're that long. That video is
okay.
basically in 3 sections. There's one drawing, 2 drawings that are my warm-ups. 1, 2, and then the third one is when I start adding a second person, start adding a little more story idea and all that kind of stuff to it. And you'll see how hopefully how it sort of progresses. You sort of get warmed up and you sort of start coming up with an idea. Also on this cafe to character thing, it's wide open, like styling wise. I want you guys to go crazy. What I don't want you to do, and the reason that I want you to do it usually from life, is I want to get you out of tropes. I want to get you out of your comfort zone. Okay. Because what people do, and I get this, I have another class. I think it's my illustration. No, it's my digital drawing class. We're doing a character design thing. And I've got one person in there and I go, stop, this looks like anime. Okay, stop doing that. And they can't stop doing it. So every time, well, I change this, I change that. It's like, it looks like anime. I mean, what, like, how are you going to get paid to do this for a living if somebody gives you a brief and they go, hey, this world looks like this, here's the style boards. It looks like, I don't know, it looks like Monsters University. It's that kind of styling or something. And you go, okay, here's my character design and it's anime. They're going to be like, what's wrong with you? Like, I didn't ask you for that. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm not just picking on anime. The reason I'm picking on anime is because anime has a very specific design language, okay? Pointy hair, those, you know, I mean, it's kind of very cannibalistic, okay? And some people do the same thing with the Disney style. Some people do the same thing with, you know, where you're like, okay, I get it. You like Chris Sanders, I get it. But like, there's already a Chris Sanders. I want you to be your own designer and be able to apply your think. Part of the whole goal of this class for me when I pitched it was that this was the fundamental skill that going into storyboarding, going into character design, going into any of those kind of classes, you need this fundamental skill. And that's the reason we go from observational to now starting to design things and now starting to stylize things and using that drawing ability. And the thing with your sketching ability and your drawing ability is at some point when you get it really good and solid, and that's what we're going to do here, is that your drawing becomes in service to the design. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you want to have that draftsmanship and all that kind of stuff and that good drawing thing, but I'm trying to help you transition it and understand how to go into styling, because I think a lot of people just, they have a hard time with that. And that's normal, okay? Because you're just, you know, they get so used to sort of like life drawing and all that stuff. And they keep sort of life drawing in these things. And it's like, this, it's not, life drawing's great, you got to do that. But it's like, you also have to learn that that's a tool in your toolbox. It's not the end, it's not the end of the game. It's just a tool. That's what life drawing is, really. It's a really good tool to structure up your drawing and understand drawing through form and all those kind of basic ideas, okay? And we're sort of taking that same idea and going into the real world with it. And now we're starting to take that and go, okay, now we're starting to draw and hopefully get a little more comfortable with that. Now I want to really focus in on that shape language and how I can push and pull that. And I don't want to just push and pull it based on like, I mean, yeah, I go in, I go, wow, he's got a really square head or whatever. And I kind of start there. But as soon as I start drawing, some narrative pops into my head because we're all humans and that's just what we do. We make judgment calls on people, whether we like to admit it or not. So I just use that in a kind of positive way and just let my mind wander of who that person is. And then that's what starts to draw. Or I might just put a cowboy hat on him just for the hell of it. And all of a sudden I go, oh, he's this guy. You know what I mean? And I start coming up with some story. And the story to me is about giving yourself structure and something to hang your design on. I think what I see all the time with character design, and I probably said this already, is kids ask me to look at their character design. I go, okay, who is it? And they go, it's a lumberjack. And I go, yeah, I know, I get it. It's a lumberjack. Who is it? Oh, well, he's a lumberjack. I mean, they haven't even thought about the psychology of this thing at all. Now, if you just draw me a lumberjack, I don't really care, okay? But if you thought it through and you kind of think about the person's psychology and all that kind of stuff, you're going to get way better work, okay? Because that's what you do. You delve down into this stuff from a design perspective. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so human interaction is super important. It's why I did the last one. I did that. What started as just this couple of old guys at a table. Because I started realizing when I did, I think the search I did for images was old guys drinking coffee yesterday, okay? And for some reason, drawing those, I started realizing there's this relationship to the table that I was noticing whenever I was, because these are old guys drinking coffee. They're not standing up drinking coffee. They're sitting at a table around their buddies or by themselves or whatever it is. And then took that a little further where two old guys at a table, then you go, okay, now the picture is just two guys sitting at an old table or at a table. But then you go, okay, if you put a chess set here on the table, all of a sudden that changes the equation. Now this guy, just from his posture, I started looking, actually I just started drawing a top hat on him. I have no idea why. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, it's this. Okay, now he needs an opponent. And what's the relationship between these two guys? It's a rivalry in this small town, blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're creating a story around it?
Yeah, like just a loose, it's not a big, this is what I'm trying to get you guys to do. It's not about sitting around and writing a story. Okay, what it is, and it comes out of, I can't really complain about this whole lockdown thing because I can work from home and all that kind of stuff. But one thing I miss like crazy is I'm out drawing every single day from life. I'm used to doing that. That's my habit, okay? And I also notice that it takes me longer to get warmed up right now because I don't have it at my fingertips because usually I'm never more than 8 hours away from drawing. And that's just when I sleep, okay? So usually I'm drawing all the time, okay? And I am sort of, but not in the same way where I'm out in the world all the time doing it. But when I'm drawing somebody, my brain just naturally goes to some sort of story about them. And what I'm trying to do is, and again, it comes down, it's almost like pattern recognition, okay? Again, it's sort of like why you see a unicorn in the clouds, okay? Your brain looks for logic, it looks for pattern, okay? And when I'm drawing somebody, because usually I'll hone in on somebody if I just think they're kind of interesting or something for some reason. And then when I start drawing them, my brain just starts going, oh, they're a Russian spy. That's what they are. And then I start playing with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not a big, I don't sit around and think of a big story. I'm just what I'm trying to get you guys to do is tie into like how you sort of use that natural ability that a lot of us have, I think most people have, of just coming up with some little, letting your brain wander, not just go, we've been focused on sort of observational sketching and all that stuff, but now to sort of let that part of your brain that wanders when you're doing that, use it. That's a powerful tool, okay? If you're gonna go out and you want to, like character design to me, and I probably said this 100 times, if you can't draw people, forget it. Like don't even bother, okay? Go out and draw people observationally, and what that's gonna do after a while is, man, you become like this student of human behavior. And once you get a lot of that experience under your belt of just drawing in your sketchbook and observing people and all that stuff, you get so much good stuff for things like character design or whatever that you would never get. Like if you're not out observing people and looking at little nuances they do and how they interact and how they talk to each other and what their body language is in relation to the relationship, if you don't see all that stuff, I don't even know why you would want to do character design. The fun thing about character design, all that kind of, or just design in general, is that you have to learn so much about so many things that the whole world is sort of your classroom every single day, which I think is really cool. And then you got this little field journal that you're always taking notes in, and man, that stuff comes back for you when you start working. Does that make sense? I don't think I think you got to have that experience. Otherwise, I don't know how you do these other things that people want to do. And it's not just character design. It could be environment, you know, who lives here? Like, go look at there's an interesting, if you go look at the Zootopia was an interesting design challenge, because one of the things they said is like, look at all the different animals that live in this world. And like, if they're in the city, how do you design a city that works for a mouse and works for a giraffe? Okay, how do you do that? Like, they thought about that, you know? It's like every doorway can't be, I don't know, 18 feet tall or whatever. So how do you solve that? Because it would have been solved from a city planning perspective. And that's kind of how they looked at it. That's an interesting challenge, okay? And that comes down to the same thing. You know, you go to the zoo, you start looking at things, start sketching things, find some sort of equivalent in the world, maybe that's somewhat like that. And then you start riffing and you start solving, because design is nothing but problem solving, if that makes any sense. Okay, that's all it is. Somebody gives you a problem and you got to solve it. It might be a character design. We need a character for this. That's the problem. Here's the parameters. That's what you got to solve it within. And that's what we're talking about here. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Mike.
Hmm.
I emailed you about this. I have a tendency to end up taking up the whole page.
Yeah, everybody does that. And thank you for
So
bringing that up.
you told me to bring it up so you
Yeah.
can.
Thank you. One of the things when you're doing, it doesn't just have to be people or whatever. I'm still sharing my screen, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Even if it's a building or a person, one thing you can kind of do, and I do this a lot, where if I'm sort of sketching somebody in, I might just sort of ghost it like that. Just the big shapes, okay? Because then I know it's fitting on my page. I know I'm okay, all right? Or if it's a building, same thing. I'm going to come in here and just start, and I do this just with pencil or whatever. I'm going to start here and go, okay, in this case, I want to get everything on the page. Here's the other part of the building. And all I do is just put in the really basic geometry and just make sure maybe my tree's over here and my path is here. You know, and there's a tree over here, and I want to get a little bit of that building in there. And I just make sure, just from that perspective, that those big shapes lay on the page. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And again, with people, you know, you can kind of get that head shape. I mean, that's all you need, really, that. Then maybe the torso, and then, you know, the legs. And I know it fits on my page, all right? I don't go any further than that. And I'm usually doing that with a pencil just super light, way back here, really super light, make sure those big 5 or 6 shapes work, or that they're fitting on the page. And the same thing with interaction, like somebody was talking about interaction. If there's an interaction like there was with the one I just gave you guys, I want to make sure that, like, this guy, I want to get this guy sort of knocked in. Here's his chair. Then I go, okay, let's say that's good enough for now. Then I got to go, okay, where's the table at? Let's say the table is here, because the table is going to become a central point to these two interacting with each other. So I want to make sure that works. You know, maybe his head's down this way. See how I'm just building it from like super simple geometry?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I got to go, in which I did on the other one. I wanted this guy concentrating harder on the board because he's the one who keeps losing. More determined looking. I think I gave him a hat. And then I got to make sure that this guy relates to this table okay. And I got his hand here, and I put his other hand here because he's thinking. I can really push this action probably. I'm going to do everything I can to make him look a little tenser. But before I do anything, I got to make sure, and I might shrink that table a little bit. I got to make sure that these two big ideas can relate to each other, and that from a shape perspective, they're okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get the big stuff blocked in there. You have to do it this way, okay? I should say you have to, but I don't know a better way. And then maybe I'll, bow this guy a little more and adjust him. And if you notice, I'm not doing a bunch of erasing. I'm just keeping my lines nice and light because I don't really need to erase. Maybe I'll put this guy's arm on the armchair. Because if you guys, the thing I'm trying to do is get you guys addicted to that sketchbook. And what you're going to see as you go on in the future, if you keep doing it, you're going to see your drawing ability get way better really fast. If you want a magic formula to getting better, it's that sketchbook and observational sketching. And then also you taking the observational sketching into your stylization thing, because here's the path. Observational sketching, now we're moving into stylistic stuff. Then you're moving into sort of being able to do that out of your head. Does that make sense? And that will happen naturally if you just keep doing this. I'm giving you the function or the methodology of how that works, okay? But you have to, repetition is the part I can't do. You guys have to do tons of repetition. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
Hi, Mike. I have a question.
Sure.
So I'm starting to get a little comfortable with pushing and pulling people's faces, but not so much with the human figure, because when I do it, I feel like it doesn't look right. So
That's normal.
do you just have to just keep playing around with it to finally find something that works, or how would you approach it?
I think, okay, so what are you having problems with? Just like getting it proportional or what?
Yeah, a bit like that, and then at the same time, just kind of like find something graphically appealing so that it works, and then I can keep moving forward. I guess that's like the first step I struggle with pushing and pulling the human figure.
Pushing and pulling the figure. The reason that life drawing is like a tenet of art education is somehow everything is locked inside of drawing the form or drawing the figure. Okay, you do all these things like exaggeration. I think sometimes what they don't talk enough about is graphic language. I think the graphic language of how that works is important. Because when people are doing really beautiful life drawings, they're really, even though they're not stylized, if you look at them, they're pretty stylized. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like Glenn Keane's is pretty stylized.
Or like, look, let's look at this real quick. If I can even find these. I'd argue that these really nice life drawings, there's a definite graphic language there. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
The way he's breaking up, like using this core right here to knock that into shadow and to separate these, or even here, the knee is a better example. That's a pure graphic language. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're sort of, even when you look at these really great life drawings and everything, and we go, okay, they're life drawings, that's a different thing. It isn't. And Ed's great at this. He's great at this. And these are like probably from when he was in college, probably. But Kevin Chen's another one that's good to look at for that graphic language of realistic, quote unquote, realistic drawing and that kind of thing. But when you're talking about it from now you're talking about it from a stylistic direction, or are you just talking about it just in general?
I would say stylistic.
Well, like one of the examples I always use is In my digital drawing class, in the 108 class, because that was all about dynamic drawing and all that. You know, you get somebody and they have somebody with a gun like this. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Holding a gun on somebody or whatever, and it's not very interesting. You know what I mean?
I
But
see.
if I
Yeah.
put both those hands this way and I drop that head down, you know, and I get all this forward thrust and the gun's here, that's a much more interesting, especially if I turn the head this way where they're looking at you maybe. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That's a whole different pose. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or, you know, so, you know, I'm going to put that head here, raise that shoulder way up, have that hand out here. I get all this, by the way, I'm going to get all these folds that pull forward too, which is kind of interesting, which kind of, what does that all do? Everything's going this way, right?
Yeah.
Because, well, you know, somebody holding a gun is not a good thing, right? And then I got to go, what's going to happen? And always get up and pose these things out, you know? Get up and go, when I do this, what do my legs do? You know what I mean? And your legs kind of go, one of them's probably going to come out. And the other one might go back that way or might come back that way. Okay? But I always just pose them out. And, you know, if it helps you in front of a mirror do it, that's fine. I usually, for me, it's a spatial relationship thing. I just need to know where the spatial relationships are. And then a lot of times I'll do the pose and I look at it and I go, man, that doesn't make any sense. But and just get those basic, and then there'll be a pull fold here probably. I don't need a bunch of them. I don't like that one yet, but okay. Some here, there'll be one right there probably, and one or two there. And then something here probably pulling out. That'll probably cut right across there. You know, and then I got to figure out what this leg's doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So just, you know, and the way I'm looking at this, again, is I'm going, there's my ellipse. There's my tube or rectangle. And then I got another rectangle right here. And one of the things that fascinates me about that, if you get used to doing that sort of language, I did this thing when I was a little kid, where I started drawing figures sort of like that, just really super simplified figures. And this sounds really stupid, but I mean, I was a kid. But and when I realized I could do that, I was like, I can draw a whole army of people at the base of a cliff, and I can move them all around, and I can do all these kind of narrative ideas when I was a little kid in these really simple figures. And I knew there was something to that. I don't know how far I got along with like detailing them out or anything, but I just remember realizing this simple idea. And if you sort of abstract this stuff out of your brain and stop going, I'm drawing people. That's what I'm trying to get you to do, is abstract your shapes, because there's always this thing that people do when they go, oh, I can't draw people, or I can't draw cars, or I can't draw whatever. And it's like, you can't draw them because you're not abstracting them. Because if you abstract these things and you understand this from a basic language, shape language perspective and a breakdown of form perspective, you can draw anything, okay? And I know that some things are, you know, we all have our weird thing that, you know, but a lot of that's just a mental block. You know what I mean? I think my goal here is that after a while, you guys just don't think of anything as like being, not that it's not challenging, but, you know, that you go, oh, that specific subject matter I'm not good at. No, yeah, you can get good at drawing just about anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And does this make sense, this kind of breakdown?
Yeah, it does.
Try and play with that, by the way. Play with like literally putting this together is just the most basic of forms. And then what you'll see is, what I like about it is then what you see is like the simple things we've been talking about now. If I go, you know, there's a fold right there. There's a fold there. I'm going to keep this simple. And just like I said, you know, here, there's going to be a compression fold right there. Another pull fold there. And you can see I'm not doing anything hardly, but it's starting to build into a person. Does that make sense? So I think really what would be good for all you guys to do is do this exercise where it's like, take the most basic forms you can do. Then the next step is to, throw a couple of folds on it. And then we can come in here and go, okay, where's the features? And again, I'm just keeping that super simple. Give them some hair. And I mean, so far I haven't hardly done anything. How am I gonna, how's that hand gonna work, right? Arm's too long right now, that's okay. I'll put it here. Because I do want to exaggerate it a little bit. And this probably would come down and bend a little bit, I don't know. It'd be a little shorter. And then the other arm's gonna be on the other side, just an indication of it. So it's one of those things where it's holding both hands. Come down here. And I'm not hardly doing anything to it. And it's starting to look like something. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Do some really simple form breakdowns like that. Just
Okay.
geometric. And then start noticing the little nuancy things. Like I'm pretty sure, yeah. If I hold it, I guess it could be straight out like that. But, and a lot of times, this happens almost every time with like character designs. I always say, get up and pose your stuff out. And when I look at the poses, they're really weird. Or I see it also in character design. When they show me stuff in character design, I go, I don't understand this pose. And then I hear that they're being told, well, there'd be this negative space here that would do this. And that's all like, I don't know where that stuff comes from. It's like, did you get up and pose it out? No. Well, that's why it doesn't look right, because you don't know what it looks like. And you're sort of making it up based on these like weird formulas. And it's like, this isn't about formula. It's about methodology, okay? Formula is not a good thing. This is methodology. And again, I'm trying to give you a very base fundamental methodology. You will build on it, and you will learn things in other classes and take those things into this and so on and so forth. And you'll cobble together your own way of doing things. But if I give you a good, if all of us give you a good foundational base in something, then however you twist that into your own thing, it'll be solid, okay? What I don't like is when I see people who they're jumping around too much, and it's like, you don't have good drawing skills yet, and you're trying to make this big leap over the canyon to something that it's a path, man. You got to do fundamentals and then build up to that stuff you want to do, okay?
Yeah.
This is very base fundamental stuff, okay?
And Mike,
Yeah.
I know you said we're all at like different levels, but
Sure.
how do you know, like, how do we know how we're doing? Like, I mean, I don't know how to gauge.
Okay,
how-
normally in here, I would have already been grading a bunch of stuff. So what I'm doing right now, this class used to be, I did more projects in it, and I realized I didn't really think that was functional. It really needs to be drawing, okay? Let me see. Let's look at your stuff. Is it in here? Is it on the drive? Yes? Yvette? Yvette.
I put some up last week and I put some up yesterday.
Okay, good. So we'll just go through it.
Oh no.
No, don't worry about it. I mean, come on. Well, look, one thing about this class I want you to understand is that, and just in general, I'm not going to pull something up here to lambast you for it. I'm not going to do that. I mean, I'm trying to be constructive all the time, okay?
Okay.
I'm just trying to just go, oh, here's how you can make it better, or wow, that looks really good. Here's what's working. I just try and be very.
Yeah, I want to know what, like what direction I should be going, because I'm kind of all over the place.
Okay.
I am getting a lot faster, I've noticed, and getting more detailed because I've been timing myself like 20 minutes each time. But
I've got a bunch of pictures in here. I don't see oh, there's some drawings. Okay. Okay, so let's look at.
I was just showing you my reference, like what
Yeah.
I didn't make it up.
Yeah. Now, make it easy on yourself with your reference, okay, which you are in some of these. Okay, so what I think I'm seeing here. Oh, that one's kind of cool. Okay, like the one of Willem Dafoe, that's a great picture. That's making it easier on yourself because you kind of want to do that.
Okay.
But what I think I'm seeing here is if I look at something like this one, it feels like it might have been put together a little piecemeal to me. Does that make sense?
A little what?
Like a little piecemeal, like we were talking about earlier with the figure, where you're sort of going shape to shape.
Oh yeah, yeah.
correct?
I mean, I was trying to do the exaggerating part, but
Okay, so here's what the balance is going to be from the rest on in this class is you're going to have to balance, because I do want you working observationally. I want you working both ways now, but I don't want you just going, because what I get a lot is people want to obviously do the stylizing thing and then they go, cool, now we're just doing stylization. It's like, no, the basis for stylization, the basis for everything we're doing is just good drawing and good sketching ability. Okay, so we have to be bouncing that off, but obviously in this class, I also have to start talking about how we take this into stylization, okay, and why it's, and I probably said this a million times, my whole thing is everything has to relate to the real world or career or whatever you want to do, whether that's travel sketching or professional stuff, whatever. It has to relate to the real world in some way. Does that make sense?
yes.
Okay, so this guy, I might have probably gone, let's pull this photo of him. Because that's the Willem Dafoe one, right?
Yes.
He's crazy looking. So there's a lot of things actually you got pretty good in here.
Didn't crop it.
Hmm?
No, I forgot to crop it.
I don't care. So let's look at this. Now, I mean, let's just exaggerate this a little bit. You know, he has, at least in this picture, he has a pretty, I'm not going to worry about likeness here. I'm just going to talk about structure a little bit. He has this sort of triangular face. You see that, right?
Yes.
Now, what I'm going to probably want to do is break this down by landmarks. And I could, and I'm going to adjust them so it doesn't matter what I do really, which sounds stupid, but he's got this really super kind of thin nose, right?
Right.
And then I'd probably really emphasize this. I'm going to put it like that for now. Obviously, he has this really great zygomatic arch right there. But if you notice, what am I starting with? Big shapes, and I'm starting to pop things into the big shapes, correct?
Yes.
You know, and then I put a little indication. His head's tilted a little bit. Skylar. Skylar was asking about tilting his head.
Yeah.
You see how high his ears are?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I was looking at him dead on, and his eyes were here, his ear would be about there. Once you tilt that head down, the ears kind of go up a little bit. Okay?
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of important because he's looking up. And I'd find some shape language for his eyes, but I think I would really focus on, so let's get that. And then I'm looking at, like, look, here's where his mouth is, and there's where his jawline is. So it starts, and that arch right there lines up right about there. So I can actually pull that down a little bit. I'm not trying to be super accurate, really, but I just kind of want to be in the ballpark. And then I'd really play up this, the values around his eyes here, because we got a nice eye socket shape there. And he's got this sort of, I might make this a graphic shape more like that stuff on his head. Or maybe this way, I don't know. This connects. Now look at, you see this shape right here, this line? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
look how it goes. That's actually part of a mass right there. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So I actually like that. I might kind of take advantage of that. But I'm always going to start with this simple, and then he has this really heavy duty laugh line thing. And by the way, if you ever listen to interviews of him, he is a pretty serious dude. Okay, then I'm going to start figuring out the chin a little bit. And then he's got this great hair. But I'm looking at it in shapes, just big shapes. This actually comes down more like that. I love this arch right there. And then he's got this nice little cast shadow off his nose, which is nice. And then look where his shirt is. Well, look where his shirt meets his face, right there, okay? It's right about there. I can just draw straight through that form so it'll connect. Then I can start softening some of this stuff. It's just not that hard edge. Then his hair actually comes down over his ear a little bit. And then I could start to render out his hair and all that. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
But do you see how we started with the big shape and then blocked out the next level of shape, which is the eyes, nose, mouth, right?
Right.
And then we block out the hair. And then what I would do, if I was going to do a likeness here, I'd have to go in and actually dial in the likeness and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now I'm just sort of looking at shape. He's got a bigger forehead than I drew. I'd probably start that back up here again. And then you got to look at like these shapes, the way they kind of flow into each other, just like this eye mask right there. I really like that because I like to show as much of that kind of mask shape as I can to get it to, you know, and these things all have to lock together. And the way you make them lock together is to do what I just did, which is big shape, next, okay? If you go, okay, I do an eye, and now I'm going to kind of draw the nose, and oh, wait, now I'll put the head around it. It's not going to work. It's all going to disconnect. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that answers that?
Yes.
Okay. You're doing fine, by the way.
Okay.
Okay?
Alright.
You're doing what I want you to do. Look, this class, again, it's about methodology and repetition, okay? You got to do the repetition. And some of this repetition, here's what the trick is here, because I've had students who just like, and I have some in here, like always. I have some that just kill it during the class, and then some I run into 6 months later, and they were doing okay in my class, but now they're totally getting it, and they're in that sketchbook all the time. Elon's a good example of that. She's constantly drawing all the time, you know, and her work constantly keeps progressing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Who else?
I'm kind of struggling with lips and teeth.
Where are you at? Teresa, okay.
Yeah.
Do I have drawings in here?
Yes. I'm kind of struggling because some drawings will have their mouth open
Yeah.
and like the teeth will be showing, and it's like I don't want to look like, you know, robots or like
Yeah.
teeth weird.
I'd say that the most, these are pretty good. I'd say the most common problem with like teeth is trying to show individual teeth. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense. Let's see if I can find, like it looks like this one is a good example. Is a good example, I think, of how a nice way to handle it, which is showing this upper lip. Now, there's a million ways to do this, obviously, but showing this upper lip in shadow, sort of like you're doing it here. So that's there, and then you're just sort of showing that bottom part of the lip, you know, the shadow, the bottom part of the lip, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you start to open it up and it becomes about that mouth being more open, here's the nose here, just to give it context, right? One of the things you can do is that, so you can still have this shadow value here, but like a lot of times you can just put a darker value right there, and that darker value will start to define the back of the teeth. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you have a stopgap there, okay? And what that does is it makes it, you know, it all of a sudden goes, oh, there's this light value, and then it stops here, and it sort of defines the teeth, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Doing it straight on. it would be here and here. That's too big, but you get the point, right?
Mhm.
Then I'd have the cheek mass here or whatever in the nose. Now, and then the eyes. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Because if I go in here, and then sometimes people will do like a little thing to separate the teeth. There's too much bottom teeth there. Just feel like that. But if I start going in here and doing this, now I can do that in certain kind of context, but it can become too much really fast. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Another thing sometimes, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this, but like, let's say we have the same situation here. We have this dark value here. Nose. You know, I might just put a little indication of those little, where the teeth separate. There's ways I can do that. It just all depends on kind of how far I am from the viewer and how much I'm stylizing. But you don't usually want to show like every individual tooth. It'll look like corn teeth.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we want to think of it as massing it just like we do anything else. Does that answer that?
Yeah.
Okay. I like some of these though. Are you putting big shapes and then working into the big shapes?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because like if you notice, this one's holding together pretty good.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, what else?
I've been.
Mike.
Yeah.
Or go ahead, whoever was.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I was gonna ask, like, if you want to get better, like, expressions and stuff, should I start like studying up on like the muscles and not like anatomy?
Look, the answer to that's always going to be yes. I think in the context of this class, I'm trying to hopefully lock into those things also. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to give you, what I'm really trying to do is like, if you take a class like Jim's class where you break down anatomy and all that stuff, which is great. I'm trying to give you a way to now transition that into your actual working methodology. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those things are always great to do. But what I want you to start thinking about is like, okay, I understand how that all works, but now I got to look at it from just a shape perspective and make this actually work. Okay. And some of it's just simple stuff where people like do this thing where they draw expressions. Like here's a 3/4 view, let's say, right? And then they do this thing where it's like, you know, where this is very flat on the face. Now you could do that. It's stylized. That's fine. But they sort of do this big flat graphic shape on there with no regard to like, well, this is in 3/4 view. How's that working? Now, if it's a shape language of something, again, like anime, they do this very flat shape thing. That's a different thing, okay? But if I'm going to turn the head that way, you know, and I want to get a little bit of structure to it, then I got to think about that mouth being wrapping around this shape and then kind of opening up this way within the head. And here's your bottom teeth. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I have to think about how that's actually, you know, going in perspective and how it, you know, whenever we have a head in any position, you know, all these things are wrapping around like that. You know, the eyes are wrapping around the head. There's the center line. But everything's going all through the head like that. So you have to think about that these things are wrapping around a form. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And that'll help you to stop it getting flat. All right?
Okay.
Actually, another thing I'll do, I'm going to try and do everything on a tutorial that I'm going to try and put a bunch of things into that I've been wanting to get to. Because I'm getting a good flow going now. I'm in my office now, so now I can actually do this from my office. I'm not constantly moving around. And I can kind of riff on a lot of things and get a lot of videos done that way, okay? And the big heavy lifting stuff, like I've said, like if I'm going to do what I just put online yesterday, that's almost an hour, I want to put that online. I'm not going to sit here and do it in class. That just doesn't make sense to me. Plus, you have it to refer back to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it
Yeah,
helps.
Go ahead.
It helps looking at it like at a flat forward view before you start turning it and all that stuff. Like.
Is it better?
Yeah, like just imagine it like
I think.
front
Okay,
view,
look. When you're
and then
learning,
you like
when you're learning, it takes you a while, I think, to get a comfort level with just moving things around and all that stuff. I get it, because I remember when like I would super overthink things when especially when I was at Art Center for some reason, and I'd be, I don't know, drawing somewhere, and then my teacher, it was class kind of like this, and we'd be somewhere, and I'd go, I don't know, this view, whatever, I don't like this view, or whatever. My teacher would go, well, change it, make it better. And I'd go, well, I can't do that, because what's the perspective doing if I move it here? And he's just like, dude, it's just a box, just turn it that way. I mean, come on, what are you doing? But I felt like I needed some sort of permission to do that. Does that make sense?
yeah.
That there was all this stuff I had to know, and you do need to know all that stuff. But I probably said this before, but like when I started doing a lot of that drawing from observation, I was like, I don't want to use, and Norm didn't do this anyway, but I didn't want to use perspective grids. I didn't want to use all that stuff. I want to be able to look at it and throw it down in a more organic way. And once I start doing grids and all that stuff, it can become not organic.
Mhm.
So a lot of times I would do drawings of places and stuff like that. I'd take them home, I'd put a piece of trace over it, and I'd find the vanishing points, and I'd see how accurate and at that point inaccurate I was. Okay. And it helped me start seeing things. And then sometimes nowadays I'll go, I want to turn that a little bit. And yeah, it's not a perspective thing, but it looks cool. It makes sense. It's fine from a design perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then you can, you'll get people who will go, well, that's like our perspective. And it's like, dude, this is why your drawings are so stiff, because that's all you think about. You know what I mean? Now, you don't want something that's wildly out of perspective or anything like that, but I know how to turn things. And the reason I know how to turn things in perspective is because I draw from life every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It will fill up your data banks. There's no other way to do it. You know what I mean? And working from observational, the point of that is, and I know I'm a broken record, but you're learning composition, editing, which is huge. Editing alone is huge. Breakdown of shape, how to break down a complex scene and actually draw it, and if you can do all that from life, man, you're going to kill it when you go in to make a drawing like in a studio or whatever, because it'll seem, and a controlled environment actually seems easy after you're doing that all the time. It's like if you're a runner and you train running in Big Bear, where it's at whatever it's at 10, 12,000 feet, you have an advantage over people who aren't doing that. It's the same kind of thing. Like you're challenging yourself and pushing yourself. Then when you go to do your thing, it's a little easier for you than everybody else, because you've always been doing it because I think working from life and all, now I love it so much. It's hard for me to, that's the only way I like to work. But when I first started doing it, I thought it was hard, man. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Going and doing all this stuff, it's hard, and especially, when you first start doing it, you're overwhelmed by it. You're like, how do I handle that? Like, I don't know how do I draw that? You know what I mean? How do I break that down? But that's the whole point, is like, how do we break it down? And a lot of it, again, is design and editing. It's like, okay, I don't need all that information over there. I need some information here, and it can trail off. That establishes it. It's like all those editing things. Editing is just like one of the biggest things with drawing or painting. You have to learn to edit. You can't sit around and do it from perspective like, I'm going to put everything in here, and even go, I'm going to put everything in here just like it looks. It won't look right. It'll look amateurish. You've got to figure out those solutions. There's a dam right by here, and like if you look at it, it's it's a million rocks all stacked up. It's like, how do you do that? You're not going to draw every rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to indicate it. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so does that answer that?
Yeah.
Okay. If I'm not answering it, tell me. All right, who else?
I have a question.
I have.
Oh.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's. Go ahead. I'll go
You
after
can go
you.
ahead. Are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a problem every once in a while where sometimes, like, I'll map everything out,
Mm-hmm.
but then once I'm done with the drawing, I realize that the face got kind of squished, so it's like shorter than it should have been.
Okay, let's look. Now, squished in what way? Because this is a pretty good one right here.
That one's fine, but like like some of the drawings. Not, I don't know if it showed up on any of these.
Now, when you say squish, do
Uh,
you mean this way or do you mean this way?
um, like head to chin, it'll
Oh, okay.
be shorter than it was supposed to be.
Okay, one little rule of thumb. I mean, if you're looking at it, you know, straight on, like you're looking at me right now, right? Look how
Mhm.
oval my head is, by the way. If you go this way, you can kind of think of this. You got a center line, right? From here
Mhm.
to here, halfway down is your eyes, right?
Okay.
Then from here to the bottom of the chin, halfway down between those two is the nose. And then it's like a third down here from the mouth right here. Okay. Then the ears are basically going to line up at the top of the eyes. And then I always have to, for me, I always have to adjust the chin. I don't know why, I just always do. Then I can think of this in terms of there's a socket in there. Bottom of the nose. And that'll basically give me, and by the way, you've got 5 eyes across. So between these, between these two, there's an eye, an eye, an eye, an eye, and an eye. So that means between your actual eyes here, you've got 1 eye's distance. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
That's just a basic proportional thing. But you can see how fast you can get structure if you do it this way, correct?
Yeah.
And then I can come in here and go, okay, I'm going to come in here and start to build, you know, the other stuff. Because what are we doing? Same idea. We're going, we did the big shape. Now I can start putting in, you know, hair. I want to give him a goatee. I just lock that in. Collar. And I start building a head, right?
Yeah.
And then if I want it now, look, you got a center axis right there. So if I go same, oops, same drill now, gosh darn it. If I want to turn it a little bit, I can kind of think of it the same way, except now this center axis is right here, moved over a little bit. So same thing though, here's my eye, wraps around, here's the mouth. Now the chin comes out a little bit. Ear, I'm gonna see a little more of the back of the head now. Same idea though. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So think of that center axis and where everything is, and then move it off of that center axis. That'll help you a little bit in the beginning. And just remember those
Okay.
eyes land right about the middle way of the head and so on and so forth. And you don't have to sit around and if it helps you at first to kind of think of it that way, it'll start, those proportions will start becoming more natural to you at some point.
Yeah.
Okay? Does
Okay.
that answer that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Who else?
I had a question about, I feel like when I'm drawing people that are wearing like really baggy clothes or dresses in particular,
Dreads?
I'm losing dresses.
Oh, dresses. Okay.
I'm like losing the proportion and their shape. Like I'm not sure if I should maybe be. I don't think any of mine that I posted over spring break are like full bodies. But I started doing that this week.
Okay. So
I'm kind of just like, yeah, I'm losing their proportion.
wow, this one's a good one. This one right here. This guy.
Oh, thank you.
That's nice. Let's play with that in a minute. Okay, so go ahead. Say that again now. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I am losing proportion, or I feel like I'm having a hard time figuring it out when people are wearing really baggy clothes or dresses.
Okay. The baggy clothes thing. Hang on. Let's look at that. Hang on. Why can't get this stupid?
I actually just dropped one in the drive, like on the
Okay.
main screen of it. That is somebody wearing like a really big dress that I was trying to draw, and I was having a hard
I don't know why sometimes, there it is. Okay. There it is. So let's go. Did you drop it in the April 18th folder?
No, I dropped it just like on the main page. Like there's a
On the
picture
main
you
drive?
want dropped.
Just
Yeah.
on our folder in general?
Yes.
Okay, let me see.
She's wearing a striped dress, short haircut.
I think it's, okay, yeah.
Also with her face, I've been having a hard time like when you're trying to draw indicators that maybe she's making kind of like a scrunched smile. Certain lines I do, I realize all of a sudden she looks like 30 years older. So I'm kind of having a hard time like figuring out which lines would indicate that expression, but not make her age by 50 years.
Where's this at? Paris or something?
Yeah, I think that one's from the Sartorialist.
Oh, yeah, sartorial. I've been trying to find the other ones that I always use, and I can't remember what they are. I use a sartorialist, and then there was one that was like people in New York or something like that. I can't remember the name of it. Sartorialist is a good one. They have a lot of interesting people on that. Now, this one, you got a couple of things here. Number one, okay, so you're kind of, this is a tricky one. And the reason is you got to start with your reference that, and here you're going to probably have to change the reference because this part right here, this whole section right here, I don't know what's going on there. If that's being blown by the wind or if that's a structural thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So whenever you do that, and what I don't want you doing, right? Well, not that I don't want you doing it, but when you're first learning this, I'd say get yourself some photos that like are understandable just from a photography or just from a logical perspective, right?
Oh, okay.
Because this one, like even in this photo, I'm not sure what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Are you?
I mean, I think it seems like it's blowing in the wind, but is that like an opportunity where I should just stylize it and make her dress just like super poofy all throughout, like on the bottom half?
It's going to be like, I wouldn't draw it like this. I wouldn't even draw that pose like that because it's,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going on in this photo. She might've been in mid step or something, but it looks like it almost looks like she's like leaning back against something. Like it feels weirdly like she's not walking, but she also doesn't feel, she's kind of on one foot. It's in a weird pose. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So what I'm saying, okay, so go back and say what you just said. You said something about it being a wonky pose or something like that.
Oh yeah, I was just saying it made me feel a lot better that you said it's kind of a tricky pose because I was beating myself up about trying to draw this.
No, this is a tricky pose. It's a tricky pose and it's a tricky, partly because it's on the sartorialist where some people, like there's a guy on the sartorialist that's wearing this, I don't know if you saw him, wearing this insanely baggy suit.
Oh yeah, I tried to draw him. Yeah.
He's got these crazy, I mean, the whole thing is just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's fun to play with. But if I draw that realistically, people are going to go, what the hell is that? Because nobody wears a suit like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'd have to find ways to make it work. This pose, I think, is, I mean, I would have to probably take her and go, here's her head shape. Here's where her hands fall. And this part's all good. I could just do a big billowy sleeve there, and then build out of it. Even this part I can probably do. The only thing I do like about this pose is right here, you can really see that plane change where it goes from light to dark right here. So that's like right here somewhere. But I would probably put her leg or her foot, maybe there and the other one out here or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, I mean, if I wanted to keep this idea here, which I don't think I would, then maybe this comes down as part of the dress, somehow folds over like that or something. I could simplify. I think I would just get rid of that, or maybe put it behind her or something like that. And then the hair, just block all the hair out. And then a little of that. And just start building it like that. But do you see how if I put her feet more in a normal, instead of like that one that's sort of dropping down this way, that just looks weird.
Mm-hmm.
And what what you're going to end up doing if you try and draw it the way it looks, you're going to end up having to put a lot of that information in there to support the pose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And it just by itself looks like she's like floating if you
Right.
don't put more information in the
That's
background.
exactly it. She looks like she's floating. That's exactly right. But does this breakdown kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And when you now you got it. So right now, and not just right now, when I go draw people, I do. It's weird. When I go draw people, from life, I'm attracted to shapes. They might just be an interesting person. It's usually a combination of both. But I'll look at somebody when I can clearly see their shape language, I want to draw them. And then sometimes, like I had somebody sometimes, let's say a younger girl comes in, a pretty younger girl comes in. I'm not usually that interested in drawing them because it doesn't really interest me that much. Or a younger guy that's just super good looking or whatever. It's just sort of like, eh. And now sometimes there's exceptions to that. But what I do sometimes is I pick the person in the room where I go, I have no interest in drawing that person because I just don't think they're that interesting looking. I draw them, just to flex that muscle going, you can't just draw everything you like. You got to draw stuff that challenges you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
But what I'm saying with this is when you're learning this process, give yourself things that are going to give you a really obvious shape language. So you can start, getting that under your belt. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
That's why I'm like holding
absolutely.
off a little bit on expression, because then everybody will go, I'm trying to guide you guys in a logical path where you learn this, then this, then this, then this. Okay.
Okay.
So I don't,
So
want you guys, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so it's okay if we're not stressing on like picking a bunch of different pictures that have very different facial expressions.
Yeah. Right now I'd worry about this idea of the big language and getting that thing fairly simple.
Okay.
Right. It's a lot like this thing we talked about before. Hang on. This thing that we were talking about before. I mean, look at these simple shape breakdowns. Does that make sense?
Yes.
This is where you got to kind of get to. And here's the thing. Once you build this kind of a simple thing, like, let's go through here. Like this, this simple, like it starts here or even here. Then you can start adding like folds and things like that, an indication of anatomy and things like that over that. But if you look at all these, look how they're starting. Look how simple that is right there. Or this, well, that's great right there. Look at that curve, how they threw her hips out like that. Isn't that nice? We want to sort of get this kind of part of it down. And then you can build it however you want. You can take as much information and pile it on there as you want. Once you got that structure, man, you can hang anything you want on it. You can take it to a very finished level of drawing. You can take it to anything you want, okay? But when you start with a stiff drawing, it's done. You really can't unstiffen it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you understand how we want to do this, learn this simple shape breakdown, because then that's the key, okay? To whatever it is you want to do. Stylization, much more information, levels of finish, whatever. You're going to hopefully start seeing it if you look at different people's processes. And I'm not just talking about this. Like you look at somebody who I just remembered, I just got a really cool book on portrait drawing. Now I got to figure out where it is. But the way the person draws, it ends up being really beautifully just loose. But they start off with a very fairly structured drawing, and then they, but it's not tight. But you'll see it. It's the same kind of process. And he just goes in and he puts in all his dark values, smudges some things out, and so on and so forth, building over this really simple drawing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's just this, we got to get this like simple breakdown of form down, and then we can kind of do anything. Okay.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That's what frees you. What other questions? Does that answer, that answers that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just not going to stress so much on expression for now.
Yeah, we'll get to that. This
Okay.
guy has a nice balance to it. Now, if we're going to take this and go a little crazier with it, because I feel like it has some pretty good structure here. I'm going to go to a black pen. Now, putting a little bump right there kind of indicates the ball and nose, which you've already started doing. I'd probably put a little more indication of that cheek mask there. I might darken up the tops of the glasses so it separates and feels like there's like a frame there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Might make this ear a little bigger. He looks older. So. And I like the way you're starting to figure out the hair. Might push that out. Hang on. I might simplify that mass on the bottom of his mustache, right? So it's not a whole lot of this. It's more of a big idea like that. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So let's do this one. I'm going to have the hair kind of wrap around so it's going out and then under and up into his beard. Okay. Same thing. You get a little compression right there. I'm going to kind of clean this up a little. I think it would actually come from there. I'm going to make that where it ties. Hang on. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Jesse, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you again.
Oh, okay, because
I
every now and
lost
then it
you for a
pops up and
second.
it says my internet connection's unstable, so I don't know if I'm going, whatever you call it. Okay, so here I might sweep that a little more to clean it up. See how that cleans up the line?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a sweep across. This is great. Comes across. Might do a little more of that, like this. And it's still not quite cleaned up the way I want, but okay, this I might darken a little to pull it forward. And then here, and again, you might want to do some little reflective kind of stuff in there. I'm going to structure this shirt up a little. Go right through. Put a seam right there. And again, because he's wearing a hat, I might put a little bit of value to tie the top of the head together. Too big. Yeah.
Mike,
Does
when you're
that
doing
make
the
sense? Jesse,
Sorry, what was that?
does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we just kind of structured it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But also notice I didn't do anything, basically but structure up a little bit, make a couple of design decisions, and that's it. Everything was already there. Do you understand that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, somebody was just asking something else.
Yeah, when you're doing the shadow of the hat, like underneath, like on top of the eyes, like
Yeah.
say they already have like a darker hair color, so you like color the value in, I guess. Not color value, but like put the dark hair in. Do you make
No.
it darker with the shadow?
His if I was going to do that and he has white hair, which to me it looks like he does, I would just make sure that that shadow value runs straight across the head and back so that the viewer's understanding that that's a shadow value, not a hair color. Is that
But
what
if they
you're
do
at?
have like, oh, if they do have a hair color though, do you make it darker or do you just?
Oh, if they do have a hair color?
Yeah.
Then you would just, then the whole thing would be this. Let's say that his whole, you know, he's younger and all this stuff. Let's go underneath it. Hang on. That way I can do it faster. You know, all this stuff. He's a younger guy and his beard and everything's darker. Then yeah, here it's gonna go a little lighter here and a little darker right there. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. But on the lighter skin, it's not probably going to be as dark. Now, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's really dark because you got a hat that far over, and if he's standing in like light or a lot of light, like on a ranch or desert or something, it's going to be a dark shadow, and it's going to cast it all the way down to like here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like to take advantage of that because it sort of unifies the top of the head. It just gives me a big mass that sort of unifies things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's a guy. Let me see if I can. I don't know if I can find the thing I want to show you, but
Well, when you stylize and make design decisions, they can end up looking and feeling like completely different people than they were. And I feel like I am trapped in the way that the image is or how the person is. And I don't push it past making it a caricature. Or not push it past that, but to I don't know, change the feeling of it, you know?
you mean like push it out of feeling like just like what it is?
Yeah.
That's shape put. You got to push the shape, and that's also again.
But I feel like when I push the shapes, it just turns into like a caricature, and it still is like.
It's gonna kind of live in that for a while. You got to get used to it. I'd say one thing again. Maybe take the faces because I think you're probably mostly talking about faces, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe do the same thing we're talking about just as an exercise, and give yourselves again some shapes that are you can see them, okay? And try and just go in and forget about I don't know, traditional drawing. What do you want to call it? I don't know what you want to call it. And just sort of maybe try. I don't know why my. Okay. Can you guys see? No, you can't see. Yeah, you can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So this kind of idea, go out and find yourself, do this very geometric idea. You know, a lot of times, I've probably said this before, I see guys and they look like a block stacked on top of another block because they have this big brow line. It could be a kind of a gourd shape. I mean, go and find those things and break them down geometrically. Does that make sense, Skylar?
Sure.
Huh?
I guess.
Well, yes or no?
I don't know. It was like, you know how we were drawing from like a photo, and then we have to take this shape language of that photo and then create something else.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I struggle to push it to that level.
Oh, I get it. I mean, I get it. You understand this is a learning process, right?
Yes.
You have to do it and do it and do it. But one of the things, the reason I say to do this simple, like just shape breakdown and go find some, because you can go find people anywhere and you can find photos of them where you can really see their shape language, whether it's like my head right here, it's super oval. You know what I mean? Like totally oval, easy to see, right? People with square head, all that kind of stuff. And what you got to start, I think what that'll help you with is to start, you've got to start abstracting it. And the more shapey you can find people's head shapes or whatever that you can play with, it'll start training your eye to see that stuff. And then it'll start to get more subtle where you can see it more subtly with people who aren't so obvious. But start with obvious. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then, so try and just do pages of, and again, you got to find people of just these real simple, I don't even care if they're finished, you know, go through the parts that make sense to you and just sort of break them down into these really simple shapes. And in a lot of them, to be honest, I don't care if I go any further than that. I just want you to start seeing shapes and start, you got to start training your eye to see it. It's really training your eye to see abstraction, really, and to start getting out of your own head about what you think a face is supposed to be drawn like, and what, because what you want to do is start getting it where you're looking at a particular person and you're just pushing and pulling and playing with the things that are in front of you, as opposed to like applying. And I think kind of what you're saying when people say caricature is you start to feel like you're just applying this idea of a formula onto things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, that looks formulaic. It's because the people who do those kind of things, caricatures, especially like the ones that I really don't like at carnivals and all that kind of stuff, a lot of those people don't draw well, but they teach them this weird formula. That's why they all look the same, because it is a formula, okay? But what we want to do is take that out, because the idea of caricature is interesting. If you look at guys like this, you know, a guy like this, you guys can all see that, correct? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Look, he's going from like this sort of straight sort of thing to this kind of stylization, fairly straight. And my guess is that Kruger's process is he probably starts here, because that's what most people do. Starts sort of straight, and then he starts pushing, and then he really starts pushing these things out, but he always keeps that likeness, right? Now we don't care about likeness. But look at this right here is a good example of what I just said. Hang on. This is a good example of what I just said, where a lot of times I see these two stacked objects on top of each other. So he's sort of got it like this. And then the nose tucks way up under that eyebrow. And then his eye's way back here. So really, for me, what I see here is this shape. And then there's this shape underneath it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I'm seeing that. And that's like, and I know I'm showing the drawing, but the drawing is, it's a good example of it. And then look, he's got the, he's kind of stair-stepping everything. So he's sort of got that stair step. And then this goes way back and does that. And then the chin stair steps back behind it. It's small, you know, and then he pulls this into it, okay? And ears really big. Okay, but what I see when I first start with that is basically two blocks sitting on top of each other. There's the brow line, and then this whole unit tucked underneath it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just breaking it down geometrically. Sometimes it's really good to look at these kind of people, because Kruger's a big deal. But he also just draws, he just draws beautifully, okay? It's not just all stylization. Like that, look at, you can see it right here, how loose this all started. Okay, then he went in and just started kind of rendering it out and let it fade off. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So this is an example of this looseness taken into this more refined area, okay? Because it can go anywhere. And then he gets kind of thing. The thing I like about Kruger is this is a really good one. So we're talking about not showing individual teeth. Well, there's breaking that rule right there, and it looks great. You know what I mean? So there's no rules, but if you look at it, he's got that dark back there to end the teeth like we were talking about earlier. And they're also showing that little curve right there we were talking about earlier. But he actually did put the individual teeth in there, but it looks good, okay? So that's, you know, just to say that there's no rules really. Okay, there's methodology, but there's no rules. And then his head shape is very clear. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Oops. And this is like, what's his name? John Hurd or whatever his name is. But again, look at the head shape. This ear breaking the silhouette, and then this great curve like that. Then again, you just apply your shape language to it. I love this way it goes up and then out like that. Okay? But here's your basic shape. And then look how this compresses on itself. He's a thin guy, but that still compresses because he's pushing his head back. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How we're seeing that?
Yeah.
And then if you go, the thing that's interesting about this, if you go, he did one of Tom Cruise years ago that I thought was interesting. If I can find it. Well, this one also is interesting too. Completely different stylistic take. It looks like it's a Sharpie or something like that. So what does he do? He relies on all these. It's another thing you guys can do. He relies on all these dark shapes in here. Everything's massed together as a dark shape. Here, 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 here. Okay, so now you're talking about just taking advantage of all those dark values. Look, there's no detail in those eyes. There's no detail anywhere on this whole drawing. Okay, it's all big, black, dark shapes. Does that make sense how that's another approach, a very graphic shape language approach?
Yeah.
Yes? Does everybody understand that? There's a bunch of ways to approach this, okay? There's a whole bunch of ways to approach it. And I know, and it takes time to get the hang of this, but once you lock onto it, you'll get it. Because it's actually, at its fundamental thinking, it's actually a pretty simple idea. Not that it's simple to do, but the underlying idea of it is pretty simple, okay? So I'm not saying it's easy, okay? I had somebody get on me for that, so I don't do that. And I don't think it's easy, okay? And if you know who Tom Waits is, that's Tom Waits. I mean, it looks like Tom Waits. Same thing with this, Steve McQueen. But who would have thought of pushing Steve McQueen there, okay? Let me see if I have one more.
Okay, so looking at these different artists, would it be useful, because I have trouble leaping from something that looks realistic to exaggerated features.
We all do.
Do you think it would be useful to attempt things in different, like that artist style, another artist style that I like, just to experiment, not to say
Okay.
I latch on
I
and
don't
copy.
think that's bad. It's sort of like taxiing down the runway. And then what can happen is you start going, okay, I'm starting to get this, and you start kind of taking off a little bit. What I don't want you to do is get overly, I don't think that's a bad exercise to do what I just did, like just draw over them and go, oh, that's interesting how he handled that. Okay. And then to start applying that, if that helps you, absolutely. What I don't want to get into is that, like, you know, looking at master works or copying, whatever you want to call it, there's a value in that. But and I think it's fine, but what's happened in today's language with mostly with younger people is they just all of a sudden they just start doing fan art. You know what I mean? And you're like, that's not, because I keep hearing people and they go, oh, these are master copies of, I don't know, character designers. And I go, you've been doing this for like half the term. This isn't master copies anymore. This is now just fan art. You're just making fan art. And fan art to me isn't helpful. But going in and doing a draw over like that, you just put a piece of trace over it or do it on your computer, however you want to do it. And just looking at how they broke the shape down. And But if you're going to do that, try and do it in the way kind of like we were just doing. Do you see how much more graphic the language is here?
Yes.
Sort of simplified. But yes, I think there's a good value in, you know, going over this and just going. And if I was going to do it, I would just do it like this. I would just go. I would do that.
Okay.
and just figure out that really basic, because I don't care what we're doing. And again, I'm going to go out and do the landscape video, hopefully as soon as the weather clears. And what I want you to understand with anything like this, you can break it down to like 1 to 5 shapes, usually, maybe 7 at the most. Okay.
Okay.
And if you can always think of that, like when I go out landscape painting, one of the first things I do is just to get my brain aligned is I go, okay, what's the 5 big shapes here? Or 4 big shapes. And I go, those mountains, that mass of trees, that building, and this foreground stuff. Okay, there's my 5 basic shapes. As long as I start there, it helps me to work into it methodically where I'm not just going all over the place and getting overwhelmed with information. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm placing, because it doesn't matter if it's landscape, I'm placing big shapes down, then I'm working into those big shapes just like we're doing here. And then obviously the fun part about this is all this whole fun thing to do. And then if I took it to the next shapes, I'd probably go, there's that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I go, eye, cheek mass. And this is really important right here, by the way. And it's the thing I hadn't thought of before. That's what I love about this kind of stuff, is this jowly thing he has going on right there. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Like I never noticed that before. And then boom, and then he really shrunk the chin. And there's, look, it's already starting to get a likeness. I'm not doing anything. You know what I mean? It's that, it's training. And again, when you guys go, hey, I'm having trouble with this or that, you're going to have trouble with a lot of this stuff. It takes a while, but what is going to happen, and I think actually, so thanks for mentioning this, because I actually do think this would be good exercise. When you start locking into it and your brain starts getting it and you do 1 or 2 that you start hitting, you're gonna lock into it and you're gonna get it. Okay. And the reason that I want to try and get this basic idea down for you is the quicker, and hopefully everybody in here is having that sort of progress, the quicker you're having like, okay, that looks way better than before and all that kind of stuff. That's what kind of drives you forward. It's important. Okay. You have to have victories along this thing or else. This length right here of how the head is sort of squished this way a little bit, there's a little more of a cranium back here, which you started to get here. But this, like, forgetting about that cranium, because when you turn that sideways, there's that, you know, there's a lot of distance between the ear and the back of the head. So whenever you're drawing a figure, whenever I'm drawing a head in sideways like that, I look at the distance between here and the back of the ear, and that just helps me go. It's again, it's like having a shape and I can place it. And I go, well, there's not this much room behind the ear, there's this much. And it just gives me, this little area right here gives me a nice way to measure that. Okay? This one's a lot better. Anything?
Generally, I just want to know like how I'm doing on mine. This is Emily.
Emily, where are you at? I think these are pretty good. You gotta, I'm okay, right? You guys can hear me? Because I like these, like this one I like a lot, but then I'm getting this sort of random mark making right there. What does that represent?
She had like neck rings on, like necklaces.
Just like hanging?
Yeah.
See, when you start doing this kind of thing, I don't know what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I gotta know, so is this like a collar here?
Yeah. It's part of the she was wearing.
And it's open here? Is that how it's working?
Mm-hmm.
So these, I'm guessing, I don't know what kind of necklaces they were, but it would probably help if maybe I had 1 or 2 that were more, you know, sort of that kind of idea, like the chain necklace thing. So it'll tell the viewer it's a necklace.
Mm-hmm.
Like I need something to tell me it's a necklace, right? And that could be, you know, there's a lot of different kinds. You know, maybe it's this kind, you know, and it's got some sort of decorative thing on it. Maybe it's this kind where it's more of a chain idea. You know, maybe there's something hanging on it that would really tell me that it's a necklace. Just something to give as a graphic language to tell me it's a necklace, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I like this one a lot. But like here, that same thing where this guy, like, if you're going to do this, which is cool, like that hair going, so I'm just going to simplify. And then this, and I like it when people do this, where that, you know, make sure that you're following that form of the hair, and it's in sections just like you're doing it. But I think I'd make sure that it's more, you're showing me the planes of it more like that. Does that make sense? Emily? You there?
Yeah, you were breaking up a little bit, but I kind of understood what you're saying.
But do you see what I'm doing, how I'm unifying the planes of the hair?
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense, right? We're going to clarify a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and same thing here, you know, you can kind of figure out your shape language. And I know you're doing a little more straighter version here. Make sure you always block these things in first. Okay? And then unify them. Don't have too much shape language going on. Just get them unified.
Mm-hmm.
So this, I might even do a little language like that. And I know I'm stylizing a little more, but does that make sense? I just want to get all the graphic units all sort of clarified.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But good, these are good. And this is interesting to me too, because this could start a whole line of thinking. I like the way it's sort of like that. I mean, this is how I push it. I push it even further like that. Then get these bangs or whatever kind of clarified and simplified. Because we're not worried about likeness right now. We're just using this as a big jumping off point for shape language, right? Yeah? Okay. You know, and I might just push it even further. Maybe give her some ears. Just because to me, I'm seeing it as squashed a little bit and the cheekbones popping out. And then I'll do 50 versions of that and just see what I come up with. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just one, you know, you want to take it and like, I just see shape language when I see this stuff and then I run with it. I just go, and because who cares? All you're doing is making drawings. You know, who cares? Some of them work, some of them won't. But you got to follow that thread, that shape language thread throughout it. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So that answers that, correct?
Mm-hmm. I had a couple that were like more of like the full body sketches on there too.
Okay. So like these?
Mm-hmm.
Or let's see.
It was more that the first page.
Okay, again, it feels like these might be going shape to shape a little bit. Are they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So again, I'd say it's the same thing. Make sure, and also like doing this individual hair thing. He probably had ratty hair, I get it. But there's a lot of people on that website have ratty hair.
Yeah.
It's a super weird website. But I just love that somebody thought of that. Like, I'm just going to go take a picture of all these people at state fairs for no reason. But so I'd probably place this, again, same drill. Get the head shape. But then draw this whole thing in a big unit. And sometimes I don't usually do that. Well, I do, but I don't know if I suggest it. You know, get the arm in there. Like, where do the hands land? They land about there. Where do the elbows land? Okay, they're about there. And by the way, if you notice, I'm being pretty geometric, okay? And sometimes I do to place it, but then I soften things up. I soften up edges and corners. I don't want all these pointy shapes. You know, and then this comes around. And with that. And I'm going to establish everything. And then I got to find out, like, okay, this actually comes down here. And this will go here. Head's a little taller. And if she has a sleeve, whatever. Then I start adding this, you know, other stuff.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's just hard to uh, simplify it, like, and especially when you see like a really like round person, it's hard to go in with straight lines and geometric shapes first. 'Cause
Do
your
it
brain
however
just
it
sees,
works
like,
for you. For me, a lot, and you'll see this a lot with life drawing and stuff too, where people, they sort of, because what you're looking for, like in life drawing especially, because people are nude, right? And you're looking for every little place where that shape changes on that surface form. So sometimes it helps to go, bing, there's a shape, boom, there's a change, boom, there's a change. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. It could be you just throw it down looser, rounder, and that's fine. But the main thing is the main thing we're trying to do here is train our eyes to see. That's your number one thing, okay? Everybody thinks it's here. It's all this fancy dexterity. It's not. It's all in your brain and your eyes. The hand will follow, okay? You have got to train yourself to see these shapes and these breakdowns where you start seeing the whole world as kind of an app. That's how I go through the world. I see shapes, okay? And I just look at things and go, wow, that's a cool shape. It could be a building. It could be anything, you know? But that's how I see it. And then when I sit down to draw it, it's totally abstract to me. It's a pattern, more or less. And if you kind of break it into pattern, it's a little easier to tackle. Yeah?
Yeah.
It's just a little easier to tackle. But it's a process. You will hit it if you do it over and over again. I think you guys are. But you'll have, hopefully, if you're doing it enough, you'll have moments where you're like, I'm starting to get this. And you're starting to, and by the way, don't go, oh, well, Mike said do all these hard angles. I'm not saying that. I just go, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But just go for it, however you're going to go for it. But the main thing is place those big shapes first, then adjust them, and then start building into them. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, does that answer that?
Yes. Thank you.
I think you're doing a good job. Oh, my internet connection.
I have a question. Well,
Sure.
not really a question, but yeah, I think I'm having trouble with the stylizing part. Mine, like, I don't know, they don't look stylized. They kind of just look the same as the original picture.
That's common too. By the way, nobody's going to say anything in here that's not common, because we all have the same problem. Oh, these are nice. These are pretty nice right here. Now, where are you talking about? Like here, maybe?
Like, I push it too far. Either I push it too far or I don't push it far enough. with them.
I think actually that's fine. I mean, I don't know if you can push it too far. I guess you could. But like I'd argue right here, this one's starting to be kind of interesting. I mean, they don't always have to be pushed into this sort of cartoony area. They could be pushed into more, like one thing I really like, the guy I was talking about earlier that I went to college with, who was always doing caricatures of people and all that kind of thing. His stuff always had some anatomy in it, but it was pushed. But, you know, you can go in that direction too. It doesn't always have to be pushed out. What's interesting about this guy here to me, this guy, is I love that kind of big upper head shape. And if you want to push it further, you could push his eyes down, because it looks like he pushed his eyes down a little bit lower on his head and really push this. Hang on. You could push this eyebrow thing. You could push all his features down, which you've already done. You could simplify him a little more, maybe even scrunch up his nose a little more into where his eyes are. Because you've already established this bigger top part and this big heavy brow line, which I like. You know, and then you could push all these shapes out and probably drop it a little bit. And just simplify it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I like what you're doing. I think you're working through it right now. I think you've got some nice balanced drawings in there. I was just looking at them. I think that this one here that I pointed out is starting to be stylized, but I think you just got to play with different stylizations because sometimes it's a more, it's not pushed totally crazy. The only thing I'd say about stylization is you never want to be in the middle. You never want people to look at your drawing and go, is that stylized or is that supposed to be realistic? You don't want to be there. You want, and when people look at it, you want them to know it's stylized or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. But you've got a good starting point here. And the other thing that's fun is the way you did the brow line, sort of like that, and then you sunk the eyes underneath the brow line, sort of like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then you sort of got this, again, that mass right there. And then a really nice little triangle shape for the nose. And again, I'm not worried about likenesses. I'm just worried about, I like the way you did the smile on it. It's cool. I'm pushing them way more sinister, but there you go. You know, a big forehead, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So you could simplify it more if you want. You've already set up the shape language for it. Now explore the shape language you already set up. You already set up the shape language. So you've got this low brow thing and the eyes are sort of built right into it. That's a great starting point. And then just go and do what I just did and turn it into a little more graphic language and explore it that way, but explore it both ways. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. What else? By the way, you guys, if you want to this week, maybe we could do a short meeting if you guys want, if as you're moving along. And everybody doesn't have to do it. It wouldn't have to be mandatory or anything. But if you guys want to do that during the week, maybe have a quick meetup and we can, go over what you're doing during the week. We could do that. You guys want to do that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be
Yes.
awesome.
Please.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do that. Because like going a whole week apart, even though in the classroom it's one thing, but I think having a quick meetup where you can go, hey, do the same thing we're doing right now and go, hey, I'm having a little bit of trouble with this, that, and the other. And just, make it casual and, or maybe hang out and draw. I don't know, but we'll figure it out. Okay. So that sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll put a date on there because I just got to do it in between my other stuff. And as a group, maybe I'll put 2 or 3 days and then just pick one where everybody can who wants to go can do it. Okay. I also want you to understand that, okay, so I'm getting more caught up, even though I'm not totally caught up. But some students will somebody sent me an email during the week, and he goes, hey, I'm having some trouble with this. And I just did a quick little overlay 10-minute video, and I just sent it to him. If it's relevant to the whole class, I'll put it on YouTube. But sometimes it's just individual, and they'll just send me something going, hey, I'm having a little trouble with this. I'll just do a quick 5 or 10-minute video thing over it. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
So, once in a while, if you're going, whatever, but if we meet it during the week, we can do that. I mean, there's different ways, I want to keep in communication. I do want to keep in communication. And I don't like it being a week apart. Now we just had 2 weeks apart. So it's like, if we can get it back on track that way, we're, everybody's checking in once in a while. So they're not feeling lost. Okay.
That sounds good.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, I'm always creating content, so I have to do it in between that too, okay? It's the constant content creation that's actually eating up most of the time that I'm doing, but I have to do that, so whatever. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Mike.
Uh-huh.
So the one I find, if I can draw from life, it's more satisfying because it's quick, it's in the moment. When I start going on Earth's worlds and everything, I had some good drawings I was happy with, good's a questionable word, but things that I was satisfied with.
Mm-hmm.
But then things start to feel contrived, when I'm working from a photograph. So anyway, with all that said, could you pull up the drawing that I did of my mom from life and help me structure that up?
Oh, okay. By the way, I like all that, what you just said. Because what it's telling me is you like drawing from life, and you're getting it, like what the difference is. There's a big difference, You're trying to, when I look at photographs, I sort of tend to go, I don't actually hardly ever do a straight drawing from a photograph. I just hardly ever do that. I just, for some reason, I go right to stylizing it because it's the only thing that feels good to me to do that. Like drawing, and this is just me, my psychology. Like drawing, and not that there's never a time where I would draw somebody straight from a photograph, sure. But like when I'm just doing it like every day, I go, it's kind of like what you just said. I go, this isn't real. Like I like it to be real. You know what I mean? I like it to be in front of me. I like to hear the people talking. I like if I'm drawing somebody, even in a bar or something like that, you know, I start talking to them because I'd rather draw them while they're talking than just have them go, hey, just sit there and don't say nothing. It's like, no, let's talk, you know? And then you get this like nice natural thing. They tell you cool stories and all that's part of the equation for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I want those stories. To me, the sketchbook, when I go to do those like bar portraits and stuff, the only thing they're really for, I mean, you know, to draw, but it's an icebreaker, man. I don't know what it is about the sketchbook, but I can pull into some weird town. I have a fascination with this where I just find weird little towns. And then I want to know why people are there. Because you go, nobody aspired to be here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You end up here. You don't want to be here. You know what I mean? And then I want to find out the story. Like, how are these people here? I go find the local bar. I take my sketchbook in there. I have a couple of drinks. Everybody's already lubed up. And normally I'm pretty invisible when I draw, deliberately, right? But I'll kind of grandstand a little more in there because then people go, hey, what are you doing? And they come over and they start talking to me. I go, hey, man, blah, blah, blah. And he starts talking. And I go, no, I just keep talking. You know, and I draw him and stuff. And they just start telling me all these crazy stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a cool icebreaker. I don't know what it is with that, but that's one of the values of it to me. And if I was going to do, and I've done this, if I was going to do research for some project or something, and there's some place or whatever that relates to it, I'm going to go in and do that. And I'm going to get 50 stories that are going to give me great ideas, or even just stylizing that guy I'm drawing, why he's telling me that story, and, you know, starting to put it's the same thing we're doing right now. I'm putting all those things together, and then I kind of arrive at something. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's hugely important. I think it's really dangerous what's going on right now, where it's like right now on Facebook, there's this thing going around where they're going like 6 fan arts or something, and it's 6 panels, and they go, give me 6 figures to draw, or 6 characters or something. And I look at that and I go, okay, you got 6 panels there. You could actually tell a narrative with those 6 panels. How about that? Like, why would you just sit around and copy somebody else's character designs? Like, no interest in that. You know what I mean? It's like, you got 6 panels, draw a narrative. Like, you know, make this one bigger, make that one smaller, and tell a little story or something in there. Why is that not the trend as opposed to this constant copying? And I think there's a danger in that, of not having experiences. All your experiences are through entertainment. And then if you're going to go out and try and work in this field, what are you bringing to the table? You know what I mean? Okay, I can draw just like Chris Sanders. Well, I already got Chris Sanders. Guess what? We're Disney. We can go hire Chris Sanders. We don't need him. You know what I mean? Okay, maybe you can go over here to DCP and draw style guide stuff. I mean, maybe you do that. And if you like doing that, that's fine. But I mean, if you want to be a content creator or whatever, then you got to have your own ideas. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
My rant for the morning. Okay. I'll do it. Probably it. This one?
Yeah, that one.
It's pretty balanced. Okay, just from a structural perspective. Oh, as long as you got my rant and everything. No, and look, I'm not trying, and I know I am. I'm trying not to do the old fart telling you to get off his lawn. I get it. Okay, Susan.
Yes.
Okay, the main thing I would say is, like, see how most of your lines here are kind of a little bit ratty?
Yes.
One of the things you want to do when you block this stuff in is go nice and smooth. Okay, and then as you start to commit to these lines, like I just put that line there as a landmark. Does that make sense?
The line for what? I'm sorry, you were
right here, in the tip of her arm.
Oh, okay.
I put that there because it's sort of like, I would look at it and go, where does it land in relation to this shape? You know, and then her knee goes here. Like, this is a tough pose, and I think you did a pretty good job on it. What I mainly want to see here is, like, here, you know, give me a couple of let's go here. give me a couple of like, see how just adding a dark line right there helps it? Do you see that? Right here on the hair?
Yeah.
I need to get some places.
Yes.
What you're developing, I think, is sort of a loose, and I love this style because it's basically what I do. Sort of a loose line thing, and then you clean, and then some tone, and then you just dance over it and clean it up here and there, and let the rest of the stuff live like that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so look, like here, clean up that. This one's fine. Give me a real, like this arm is going to go sort of like that, and then it's probably going to get some sort of mass going over it, a fold going over another fold. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes.
So give me a little more, like it might just be that, okay? That's a little big, but you get the point. Don't,
Okay.
you know, be careful of these wobbly lines that sort of do that. And we actually also don't want to overstructure it. So it's sort of a dance. Like you don't need to do that everywhere. Like this little line I put in the hair, it looks like it doesn't need much more than that. Maybe I'd unify that a little bit. I'd structure up the glasses a little bit. Why? It's a mechanical object. I'd also probably put a little bit of dark value inside this eye socket, like right there. Just a little bit. That's a little too much on the left. So like here, I'd probably clarify a few things. Basically, you need to go in and just kind of clarify here and there. Now, where the dance is going to come in is you don't want to go and just harden up every single line or you'll lose this. What you're starting to develop is this like tone and line thing, which is really nice. But now it's just like, where do I clarify a few things? You know, here. This, again, I'd probably have a little more fabric, pull over that. And here, for sure, this is like the leg is meeting the other leg. So you got two things going on there. So you got, if the light's here, this is going to get darker anyway, but it's also going to separate this leg over that leg. See what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
So one of the things you got to really think about, this is pretty nice. If she's wearing sandals, really give me that information. Just like that, okay?
Okay.
Just give me, you don't want to overdo it and you don't want to underdo it. And I know that sounds stupid, but it's like, you got to, yeah, you throw it down nice and loose. Then you come in, that's what I do. I throw it down super loose and then I come in and go, I'm going to hit that one. I'm going to separate that. I'm going to darken that line. I'm going to hit the bill of the hat to pull it forward. I'm going to structure the glasses a little more because glasses are mechanical. And just stuff like that. That's it. Okay.
Okay.
But like, I think the face shape is nice. I think the way you're starting to handle the hair is nice. Also with the hair, now just your thing is like, be careful with this kind of idea. This kind of thing. Like here on the hair.
Yeah.
Be careful with this sort of, this kind of idea. Like where it's starting to get a little scribbly.
Okay.
Now that you can use a scribble language sometimes depending on the kind of hair. But when it's hair, you sort of want to structure it.
Okay.
You know, and then you can think about where the planes are. And you can do this with the side of your pencil. It doesn't have to be lines. I usually do it with the side of my pencil.
Okay.
But see how I'm just sort of unifying those areas? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So you're doing a line and dance thing, which I like, or a tone and line dance thing, okay? Keep developing that. 'Cause that's a really nice style. And by the way, if you look at Adolf Menzel, it's what he was doing. You know what I mean? He's got a line, a bunch of fat
Look at him
tone.
again. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I'll check him out again.
Yeah. And if you look at him, man, it's like, you look at those things, the initial look at him, you go, holy crap, those are super whatever. But there's certain ones where it's like, man, it's just a smudge, a line, another little smudge, a line under the chin. And it's just this dance of tone and line. And you're heading in that direction. So keep moving in that direction. It's a nice direction. Okay. Also, proportionally, this works pretty good. That's a tricky pose. She's leaning over. She's got her legs crossed. That's a tricky pose. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And proportionally, it's working.
Thank you.
Okay. Does that answer that?
Yes, it does. That helps. Thank you.
All right, what else? Anything else?
Well, when I was trying to riff on a face from Earthworlds, and I thought about making it another character, I was having to go look up information like hats, and so I was thinking it would be useful. And I know that those easel nights were a great thing. I've never participated, but will when they start again. Maybe have some sort of inventory of costumes or something. Start practicing.
Okay.
What does a detective's hat look like, or a captain's hat, or things that I don't typically draw.
Yeah.
So
okay,
almost every question I have, I think the answer is always, you got to look it up and practice.
Well, what you got to do is learn to break it down is really the answer. Okay. What I'll do, because I want to do a little, I don't know how long it'll be, but I want to do a video. I'm just going to riff on it about what you just said. That'll be another thing I can add to it, which I like that idea of sort of going, let's just break this down into a shape language. Let's break this down into a shape language. Let's push the stylization of this now that we have the shape language. And that would probably help, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll do that. I gotta add it. I already had an idea of that, but I like what you just said. That's interesting. That'll give me stuff to riff off of, and I'll riff on that and just go, yeah, exactly. Well, it's just like I did the one with when we were talking about the faces or whatever. I can't remember. I did a video, and one of the guys ends up being a sea captain. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that hat shape language is in my head, right? Now, if I go look it up, I don't know if I'm that accurate, but I look at it and I go, it works, right? And that's just because I draw it all the time, and then I know how to simplify it. Because in the case of that drawing, I need to simplify it. So I love the idea of just going, how am I thinking of the hat as opposed to the whole thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'll do that, because that I should be able to just sit here and riff and just do it, and it won't take me very long.
Yeah.
But that would be good. I mean, that'll be 3 videos in the pipeline for this class I got to get done. The main one I want to get to is the one outside, because I've been dying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like right now it's all overcast again. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, what the hell? But hopefully I'll get that done. Hopefully tomorrow the sun comes out and I get lucky, because I got everything else set up for it. All I got to do is just shoot the footage. I've set up everything else. And then that one, and then the stuff we talked about with Skylar and all that stuff. So I just got this stuff in the pipeline, and I'll get it done. But what I'm starting to do is riff a little bit, and just, I can riff through a video pretty fast, and then I just have to edit it. And that's not that bad. So the whole process probably takes 3 or 4 hours. It's not too bad. Okay. So as you guys are thinking of things like that, and also I think the idea of meeting up during the week, I think is a really good idea. And again, I don't know, maybe we do it twice during the, if I have time, I will, because some people might go, I can't do it at that time, and whatever, you know what I mean? Or if, like you're saying, if you're having a little problem with something and you just go, I think this is probably a 5-minute answer, I just need the answer, then send me an email or whatever, okay? And send me the drawing and go, hey, I'm stuck here, you know what I mean? Because my thing is I don't want you guys getting stuck during the week, because whenever I have a class that goes week to week, I'm always worried about people getting stuck and then going, oh, well, I can't talk about that until Saturday. It's like, yes, we can. Okay. And especially now, because we're starting to loosen up a little bit, and we're starting to loosen up a lot now, where we're kind of going, okay, draw people straight. And by the way, when you start this stuff, I would spend the first half hour just drawing people sort of straight before I start going to stylization. I think when you jump into stylization, right, I think that requires your brain and your hands being warmed up. At least for me, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I don't think I'm unique. I think it's something that you need to warm up to. And usually when I look at people's drawings, I can go, that's the last drawing you did, right? Yeah. And I go, yeah, because look at the difference. And you can see it, man. When somebody starts here and they do like 5 pages, you get to that last drawing or that last page, man, it's night and day how different it is. I hope you guys are seeing that, right? Warming up is like half this equation. If you're not warmed up, man, forget it. It's just not, I don't think it'll happen. And maybe some of you guys don't have to warm up. I do. It takes me at least an hour to get warmed up probably. So the first couple drawings or pages I'm doing, I could care less if they're good or bad. I don't care. Because I assume they're going to be bad. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
And go ahead.
No, I said yes.
Oh, okay. um, yeah, and then also, and I probably said this a million times, if you go someplace and sketch, and I know right now we're kind of screwed, but I mean, if there's somebody in your house or whatever, and you just sit there and draw them, and you draw for like 3 or 4 hours and you're just having a good time, you will make a huge leap in that 3 or 4 hours. You will, at the end of that 3 or 4 hours, you'll start feeling like, man, I can do this. Like, and it's just because you're compressing your learning curve all the time when you do a lot of hours, okay? And a lot of repetition. What I'm trying to get you to do is actually like doing that by going out into the world and hopefully having some fun. And the byproduct of it is it doesn't feel like practice or anything. You're just going, this is just fun. I like doing that. And the byproduct of it is you are practicing and you are getting better and you are training your eyes and you are getting faster and you are getting more flexible in your technique and all that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know, Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You know, I liked what you were saying. I think it was about one of Emily's, about how you could, it was great as it was. And then you said, and then I might go and stretch it. I mean, to just think about the physical terms, stretching it.
Yeah.
Because riffing on one of those faces from that Earthworld site for me, I get fixated on features, and then it's like I just want to swap out hair, or like I mentioned earlier, a hat, and that's not really stretching things. It looks like the same person over and over again.
Yeah.
And so then I thought, well, maybe I need to take like one feature because it's too much. It's, you know, I liked all these features, but together it feels like I keep replicating the same thing.
Well, okay,
I have the same issue.
Go. What's that?
I have the same issue.
Okay, so also this thing we just talked about, doing an overlay over like John Cash work or Sebastian Kruger, these like monster whatever caricature guys. Do the same thing over a photo like off Earthworld or whatever. There's a lot of really interesting looking people on there, just from a shape language perspective. Do that over that. I mean, you can take, let's see. Because what I'm trying to get you to is to see. That's the first step, okay? And I know it's hard. It's hard to train your brain to see like that. And the really annoying part is that all this stuff at its fundamental core is simple, but it's not simple. So let's go. I mean, you could come in here just to start understanding, because all we're trying to do is get our brain trained to see these things. So what am I seeing here? I'm seeing ghost it down a little bit. But if I break this down just to its fundamentals, big ear, and that, if I look at that now and I keep, you guys can see me, right?
Yes.
And you can see what I'm doing?
Uh-huh.
But what's interesting to me about her face shape, once I start thinking of it that way, look at that. She's got these kind of sad eyes. They're kind of tilting that way a little bit. She's got a ball on her nose, so I can play up that. And the first ones I do, you know, she's got this really baggy eye stuff. And then look, this structural stuff here, like that little jolly idea. And I'm making her a little older, and I don't care. I just want to riff. And then she's got a really big ear. And then there's my line for the hair. Barely has any eyebrows, but she has a lot of value around her eyes right here. Like, you're not seeing a lot of her. That's because the light's real harsh, by the way. you're seeing most of the shadow values, which is actually what's really good about these photos from this place. Barely any eyebrows. Then I got to decide, okay, this hair actually pulls from there. Maybe I can kind of show that with line. Then there's a shadow value there. The neck actually comes in like that. And then a little more of this jolly stuff. Then that's an interesting or an important line. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
How I broke it down initially for myself, do an overlay, and then go, okay, it's kind of a square with a round top, you know? And then I just go, how can I push from a graphic perspective the things that are making her look a little weathered, right? One of them that's really important, actually one of the main ones that's important, is that jowl line right there.
Yeah.
That little bump right there. That mass right there. And then this little bit of bagginess under the eyes. That's about all I need to start pushing that idea of age and, you know, and by the way, a lot of the people look terrible on this website because they're in blasted out sunlight, which like almost everybody looks terrible in that kind of lighting. You know what I mean? It's like when you walk into a bathroom with the world's most horrible lighting, that weird fluorescent lighting, you see every flaw in your face. It's just awful. It's like kind of like that, okay? But it's good for us. What's good for us with that is that it really reduces things like eye sockets and things into sort of dark values and things like that, which gives us something to play with, okay? One of the key things to her, and it's probably, I don't know if it's just this photograph, she looks a little bit sad, okay? Just, you know, I don't know if she is or not, who knows? And part of that is just this, it feels like her eyes are sort of tilting this way a little bit, which kind of implies that thing that you do when you're sad where your eyebrows tilt this way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, she doesn't even hardly have any eyebrows, and they're not really doing that. But like, again, I love this big mass right here flowing right into the eye right there. That's just a nice one. I could add eyebrows to her. And if you notice, if I raise her eyebrows up, she looks a little less sad, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I come in here and I go, and I do tilt her eyebrows this way, she looks more sad or worried, right? If I came in here and I don't know, if I arched one up and put one like that, now she starts to look a little more snarky-ish, right? If I take them and I show her pupils a little more, raise her eyes up, see how much brighter she looks than being so sad? Okay, one thing it's implying that is she's actually looking over sideways, but you get this impression of her looking down a little bit. Okay, and if I take that idea of her looking sideways and I do it, she's looking over here, and I do that kind of thing, and I start playing with the eyebrows. If you notice, it just keeps getting different sort of emotional ideas there that aren't, and it's just moving eyebrows around or having the eye look sideways or look down. I mean, it's like the one I did in the video that I gave you guys yesterday. The guy who's sitting at the table by himself, that started with that picture of the guy sitting at the table by himself. There's something about him sitting down at the table and looking down in that weird forlorn way with his hands on the table that feels like bad news, like, oh, like he just got the news that his daughter died or something, you know what I mean? Where you just kind of sit there and kind of got to set yourself up for that. You know what I mean? You got to kind of brace yourself and get through that moment. You know what I mean? At least that's the way I think of it. Okay. But that's where my brain's always going. You know, why is this, you know, okay. So when I see people like this in reality or even here, but especially in reality, and you know, if they look a little sad or a little weather beaten or whatever, that automatically makes me go, I wonder what, you know, what's been going on in their life, why this happened. You know what I mean? And then I can't just go up to them and go, in the bar I can, but I can't just go up to them every day and go, hey man, what's the story with your life? You know, people don't want, you know, that's weird, you know? But I can make up my own scenario in my head, which is what I tend to do. Okay. Yeah. And then I go, oh, she, you know, her parents left when she was 12 and then she went off and she joined the circus and who knows what, you know what I mean? But I make up some sort of scenario, and then the scenario helps me to go, oh, So her posture'd be a little worse because she's been, you know, and holds things in close, you know, maybe her eyes are bad, you know, I don't know. But all those little mannerism things are what I'm grabbing onto and going, it makes it more interesting for me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think it makes it more interesting for the viewer. Okay. And especially if you're talking about design. But I think even if you're just playing in your sketchbook, man, it's just your mind wandering. And then sometimes I just draw things straight and I feel like doing that. Okay. I want you to be able to go all over the place is what my goal is. Okay. Does that make sense? Did this make sense that I just drew?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not worried about some big likeness right now. I'm just going, also another one. Yeah, this is fine. You know, she's got this really nice shadow off her nose right here. You know, and look at, you can see that zygomatic arch a little bit. You know, so I can keep going and I could start to add a little more of this value in here to her eyes. Maybe add a little of that. And then there's like a shadow value here, which is kind of nice. And then of course you're gonna get that one off her ear, and then her hair kind of, and then I got to figure out what her hair is gonna do. Maybe, yeah, you can see her hair on the other side too. Now, why does that matter that you can see her hair on the other side?
It gives her face, her chin definition. I don't know.
Yeah,
You could block
it gives
that
the
out.
whole side. So I could go here, because that's in shadow. And see how it pops her face out?
Yeah.
Right? I could almost probably lose the line there and just have that dark value define the side of her face. That'd be a nice little thing to do. And now we've got one drawing, right? And now you got to do 20 more. Now here's the trick. If you're on it and you're having a good time with it, like I'd probably add a few things on here and play around with it. I'd probably figure out how I want to stylize this. I'd probably do it with line. Because all that hair, why? Because all the hair is pulling back up to her ear. There's a point, right? So I might just do that with line. And then if I do that with line, then I got to continue it down here with line. Over here can stay value. And then I'm just going to go in and pop things. Bottom of the chin. I don't want to hit things too hard. It's all build. It's all a build. And then I could take this now, because I understand her shape language, and I can push it further. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we could really, I could shorten this, make her look a little older, could flare that out a little bit. And then what I really want to focus in on, and maybe I'll put this here where she maybe doesn't have teeth anymore. And then, but the main thing here is now I'm going to really pull that jolly thing there. And really push the idea of the tilted eyes that feel sad. Okay? And I could keep going, keep going, keep going. Does that make sense? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So have I covered everybody?
Yeah.
Questions? We're good? Okay, here's the other thing I want to ask. Is everybody understanding what this project is? Yeah? So we are going to end up...
How do you want us to like turn it in?
Do what?
How do you want us to turn it in? Is it just one picture?
Let me show you. I'll show you right now. Hopefully this will actually come up. So this student, can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
This student used the ice cream guy, goes, you know, with a little cart in his neighborhood. And then he did some of these. This is the guy right here. And then he, you know, he had some little backstory. I don't have the other ones. He has, he did something with these ice creams, like flung them or did some weird thing. He was like some secret something or other. I don't remember what, but it's a nice little design. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll end up probably doing, you know, one like that that establishes the character. And then a couple of in motion and a couple of expressions. Okay? And that'll be it. You can do these all on one page. You can do them all on like 11 by 17, have the character here, some expressions, some poses. And what you really should be doing is like once you start locking into it, and we have till the end of the term to get this done, so it's fine. And then you can just pick and choose from your best ones and just assemble them, okay? We don't want to start all over again. But what I like about all his drawings is they're really balanced. They're nicely balanced drawings. And I also like that he just looked out his window and that's the guy he picked. You know, he tried a bunch. The thing that was interesting about this guy is every project I give him, he'd do like 3. You know, he was just a workaholic. He worked, you know, he worked really hard. Like, I don't know if it's on here. Oh yeah, these. So this is the project I gave for a realistic zoological animal, right? That's what was required to turn in. He also did this one. These are all by hand, by the way. They're not digital. And then he did another one on this one where he did a acetate overlay and showed the muscles and bone structure of this creature. Okay? So he worked his butt off all the time. You know, he's really good. He went to Art Center, but for some reason he dropped out. I have no idea why. It really bothers me. But nothing I can do about that. But you can see a lot of, obviously, you know, he worked hard. Okay? Pays off, you guys. Hard work pays off.
Now, Mike, often you say about people's drawings are well balanced. So can you give me some definition of that or an example? What represents balanced drawings?
What it is, it's hard to say. Okay, so let's flip this one. It's reasonably balanced. Okay, what usually it does, the best example I can give of it that's an extreme example is a lot of times when you go out, like, well, at least me, I'll go out plein air painting, and what happens is your brain gets used to what you're drawing or painting, right? And it just starts, you're looking at it too much. And then I'll go home and I'll go, it's not a bad painting, you know? And I'll throw it on my easel or whatever. And then I don't know, either I'll look at it, usually I look at it in the mirror, and all of a sudden I look at it in the mirror and the whole thing is like that, like literally that much, okay? Or I look at it in the mirror and I go, how in the hell did I not see that? It's like so obvious, you know? And it's weird because I've seen it in other people's plein air paintings. Like a lot of times they still look cool, but they're like leaning, you know? And the thing with balance, what that means is sometimes you draw somebody, you know, character, or whatever it is, person, you know, whatever. And then you go, wow, it's pretty good. And then when you flip it, and that's the best way to find it. Look at it in the mirror. If it's a regular drawing, look at it in the mirror. If it's on the computer, flip it. And it will, you know, all of a sudden you'll go like, whoa, that leg looks super weird and it's on a different plane than this leg. You know what I mean? Or like, why are both the legs like on the same plane? It looks weird, you know, but you won't see it. And when you flip it, all of a sudden you go, oh, whoa. It's like, it might be a figure and the figure's like standing really weird, like what looks like they fall backwards or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like those are the things you got to correct. Or it could just be like somebody was talking about before, where you got 2 knees right here and one knee's like way out here. And it looked normal when you drew it. When you flip it, you go, that just looks totally weird. And that knee wouldn't be out here, or this one wouldn't be out here, it'd be back here. You know what I mean? Right. And it's just those kind of weird, that's why when you do that initial overall shape thing, then you can look at it and flip it when you think like, okay, I've got the basic shapes here. Then you can flip it, and if it's working from that basic shape and proportional perspective, then you can start working into your shapes and doing more with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's literally just looking at it and going, this just looks wonky when I flip it. It just looks weird. Okay, that's basically out of balance. And if you can, and the reason I emphasize this so much is it's the same thing across anything you're doing, whether it's life drawing or anything. You got to look at those things, and they got to be balanced. One of the main things that you see with life drawing And I remember it with mine, you know, I'd go look at it in the mirror and that thing would happen where just the whole thing fell apart. It was a design thing. I mean, yeah, it's like your deltoid muscle isn't right and all that crap, but at the same time, it's also just like, just from a design perspective, this just is, it's all screwy. Like the pose doesn't work. Well, and another thing you got to think about is like where the center of gravity is. Okay. So if they are standing there with their hips kicked out, there's a center of gravity there. So it doesn't feel like it's falling over one way or the other. Okay. That figure has to balance just like you do in real life. If you're standing there, you have to balance, and you're not standing there straight like that. You're cantilevered in different ways. Like your hip, you know, guys, when they look into their phones like this, sometimes their hips will kick forward. Like but that head's here, that kicks forward. And then at the end of the day, when I drop that center of gravity line, the head and the feet are sort of on the same plane a little bit. And yeah, the hips are kicked out, but it's balancing itself out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You got to look at where that center of gravity is too, you know, just in a casual way. It doesn't have to be some big thing. But like if you're doing a character in a weird pose or like a running pose or something, or some sort of action-y pose, it could just be bowling or whatever. It can't feel like they're going to fall backwards or fall forwards or you know, they got to look like they're balancing correctly. Okay. And sometimes that's just placing the feet in the right, you know, placing the feet on the, this one's in the front, so it's on a different plane than this one. It's just stuff like that. Okay. But the whole thing has to balance.
Okay. So it's being intentional.
Yeah.
About placement.
Everything about this is intentional until it's not. So it's true. And it becomes, once you get good at it, it starts to feel like, I know it's a corny thing, you hear it all the time, especially with musicians. It just feels like you're channeling it. It doesn't even feel like you're drawing it anymore. Like I draw so much stuff that I go, I have no idea where that came from. And I have no idea even how I know how to draw that. You know what I mean? How do I know how to draw that? Well, because you draw every day and I look at stuff every day and I draw stuff every day and it all goes in. Nothing will make you remember anything the way drawing does. Like it cements it into my brain. I don't know why, whether it's an experience or whatever. And when I went to my kid's graduation, his high school graduation, I was drawing. And there was people there who were like, aren't you going to pay attention? And I go, dude, I'm going to remember every single thing about this experience. That's why I'm doing this. You know what I mean? And I still do. I remember where the vents were. I remember how many bolts were on the podium. I remember all kinds of weird stuff about it. You know what I mean? But I did that for a reason. I wanted to remember that. And nothing immerses you in an experience like drawing. It just, nothing does that, or like sketching or painting or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's why I think it's so valuable. And that's why I think that it gives it gives people an advantage if you're going into things like design and stuff like that, because so many people don't do it. They go, I assign vehicle projects sometimes to people. I go, okay, let's do like a spaceship or something. They go right to Star Wars. And it's like, that's already done. Like, that's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to go to the headwaters of the aerospace industry, or however you look at it, and extrapolate out of that after you've done your research and your shape language stuff. And then you know how to sort of build your own idea based on whatever the brief is. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're trying to do. And it doesn't just have to be character design or whatever. And for me, it's everyday sketching. I love to go out and just sketch my experiences. It's a diary to me, basically. And it's an obsession. And it's just this weird need to do that. And I don't even understand. But I've had it ever since I was a kid. And that's, for me, the most important thing of it. The byproduct of that was that I could draw well, and I could go into the industry and I could go, oh, you need that, you need that, you need that. Yeah, and I could draw it, whatever. But that was sort of the byproduct of it. That really wasn't the end game for me. The end game was to be able to document sort of my everyday experiences and things like that, even though I hadn't put that all together yet, but now I have. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that's the most valuable part of it. It's all good. All the other stuff this does, it makes you better as a designer and all this stuff. But to me, it's that personal thing. It's the most important part of it, because that's where you're going to pull everything from. And that's when I look at like animated movies and I see little nuancy things and I go, you know what I mean? That came from something real, or that solution came from something real. That's not somebody who's just looking at movies all the time. That's somebody who's like out in the world observing and getting ideas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you believe it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. You believe it resonates with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's why those kind of movies can be so touching when they hit those little things. You know what I mean? I mean, you're looking at movies pre-3D and all that stuff that made people cry, and all it is a bunch of abstract drawings on paper, and you care about that character. It doesn't exist. it's drawings on paper. I mean, that's what's so fascinating about that period of 2D animation, is how much you care about those characters, and they're nothing but drawings, you know? And I know now they're 3D puppets or whatever, but the idea of it just being an animator sitting there with literally paper and a pencil and creating this big epic thing that you care about, that's still going on 70 years after they made it and people still care about, that's important. And if you look at most of those guys who did that stuff, they didn't come out of animation programs because they didn't exist. They were all fine artists who could just draw really well and design really well, and they needed a job, and they went to Disney. They got a job. Does that make sense, you guys?
Yeah.
Why we're doing
Yes.
this?
Yeah.
We're doing two things. We're trying to improve our drawing ability so it's at our fingertips. Okay? So you can spill ideas onto a page when you need to, that you can speak to, you can present your ideas, you know, or just document the things around you. All those things feed into your skill set. And I'd argue that if you do it this way, where you're going, I'm going to, you know, I'm going to approach it from that perspective, you're going to have an advantage. Because I can tell you right now, most of the people who are like, especially entertainment programs and things like that, all they think about is I want to do character design. 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 And it drives me at the wall. It's like, A, you don't care about human anything. B, you never draw from life. You never observe anything. C, you don't draw worth a crap. And you're not a good designer, but you want to be a character. So you want to jump to the rock star position, but you don't have any of the skills to do that. I find that annoying. I think you should be an artist first, build your artistic skills, and think like an artist. Then everything under that umbrella, you got the artist thing, and then everything under that umbrella, you got design, you got character design, you got all those things you want to do, and those are all great. Get the skill set first and think, and start thinking like a designer. Okay, does that make sense? Tell your own stories, man. I don't care if it's in a sketchbook. I don't care what it is. Start telling your own stories, you know? Even if you're going to go work, you know, most of us end up working whatever, in-house studios, whatever. You're going to bring that to the table. They're going to realize that at some point like this. You want to be on the side of concept. You want to be coming up with ideas. That's where the money is, and that's where it's much more satisfying creatively. Now, some people don't care about that, and that's fine. You just want to be a character artist? Cool. Character artist is not a character designer, okay? If you want to be a character designer or a character artist, that's totally cool. All that's cool. But you're not going to be telling your own stories for the most part. Somebody like me is going to come to you and go, I need Donald Duck carrying a balloon and surfing. And you're going to draw it for me. And I come up with the ideas. And I'm probably going to give you a sketch of mine and go, I want something like that, but I want it all on model. And if you like doing that, and some people do, that's fine. But I don't want to do that. Does that make sense? I don't want to do that. I don't want to be, I always looked at things and I go, that's grunt work. I don't want to do that. And it's not, by the way, because some people love doing it. It's not grunt work. Just in my brain, it was. Okay. I was like, I don't want to sit there and have this guy tell me what I'm going to draw. I want to come up with what I'm going to draw. Or I want to design the toy. I want to, you know, present it, just, you know, blah, 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 blah. I want stuff that's out in the world to be my idea. Does that make sense? And I think most of you do too, whatever it is. It could be a painting. It could be gallery work. It could be anything. Okay. But you want to have your own ideas, and you got to go out in the world to get your own ideas. You cannot sit behind a computer all the time, says the guy who's sitting behind the computer all the time right now. Okay. But I'm always looking for things to, you know, spark my brain. And there's a lot of stuff like Susie talking about everyday objects and how you approach those. That's great. It sparks stuff that was kind of floating around in my brain. I go, oh, that's great. That kind of ties it together with maybe 3 or 4 things. Because we're hopefully starting to understand this, whatever you call this, stylizing thing, okay? So at the end of the day, what we want here is we just want to organically develop a character. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm really big on that, organic, right? Don't overthink it. Don't worry about it. You will land on something if you do a lot of exploration. Then you'll go, oh, this is the person. I'm going to start playing with this. And then you start iterating on that idea. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to put a potential day we could meet just for a casual thing during the week, okay? I have to look at my schedule and when my holes are. I can't remember. But, and then let's do that. And again, this is going to be a casual thing. I'm obviously not going to monitor who's there or anything. It's just people who feel like they need to come in and talk and go over stuff and what they're having, just like we just did right now. What are you having trouble with? What are you having trouble with? That kind of thing. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. So,
Sounds good.
I think you guys are getting it now. I really feel like yesterday, or really today, is the kickoff of this idea of really stylizing. Okay. And again, I want you doing both. I want you stylizing and just drawing straight from whatever. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
And if people around your house use them, okay. Actually, I should also probably do one on like at least a brief one on animals. So I might cram everything into like one video just for all that sort of random stuff, like stylizing this and that and the other, and maybe because I actually do want to talk about how you kind of can handle fur on an animal and that kind of thing too. Because usually we go to the zoo, but I can talk about that. And so that, you know, I might have one or two videos where you're like, I'll name it something, but it might be a couple of different ideas that in my brain all sort of fit together. Does that make sense? Because I tend to come in here, I sit down and I riff for however long, then I go and, you know, I don't know, maybe the next day or that night I come in and I riff on some more stuff and I riff on some more stuff. And then I get those ones that make sense and I edit them all down and I pick the 2-3 best ones and that's what I put together. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, you guys. If you have any more questions, text me, email me, whatever you want. Right?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, you guys. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a good day, Mike.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
I gotta find my Zoom thing. Okay.
Bye, Mike.
See you later. Thanks, you guys.